Hello and welcome to my channel, Re-Vera. I'm looking forward to having a great discussion with Eagle-Winged Turtle. He'll be introducing, or actually, I don't even know which pronouns they use, or if it's a he or she or they. So I'll give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. We met on Vosh's live chat, and yeah, he just was questioning the wisdom of supporting Bernie Sanders over just pushing for a third party because the Democratic Party keeps screwing progressives, which, yeah, I think that's valid. I'll only turn my camera on. Hello. Get this a little over here. All right. Lots to talk about. We are not in World War III yet. Trump is trying his best to change that, obviously. Uh, if you haven't been following the news, the new year has been starting off with a bang. Trump started by assassinating the leader of the 14th largest military in the world, who's populated with 82% of his own people. Regardless of anything that person has done, that's not smart because it's not worth starting World War III over, potentially. And if you don't know, about a week ago, less than a week before when he did the strike, uh, Iran was doing joint exercises with Russia and China. So that's the second and third largest militaries. It's not smart. I might talk more about this later because there's a lot to talk about. There's been more news since then. With a few hours after that, they did another strike on another Iranian target, and then obviously Iran's mad. Trump said that if they retaliate in any way, he has 52 targets, including targets of cultural interest in Iran that he's going to strike. Not smart, obviously. That's we yeah. War with Iran would be far more expensive, dangerous, and cost more in lives than the war in Iraq did. And what did we get for the war in Iraq? Well, there's more news on that front because we spent $2 trillion, lost thousands of American service people, tens of thousands more wounded. Way more than that have PTSD and mental issues, and there's suicides running rampant among these veterans because they don't feel like they were fighting for anything worthwhile. So we sacrificed all that, destabilized the whole region, killed hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians. And just, I think it was yesterday, the Iraqi parliament voted the United States out of Iraq. So after all that, how much favor have we gotten in the country? Are they on good terms with? No, they want us out. So we've got nothing for all this. So all the conservatives are going, yay, let's do it again, but worse. So not super excited about that. But that's, I wanted to say at least a little bit about that to broach that topic because that's bad. But to me, I think there's nothing more important in the world to talk about right now than getting Bernie Sanders into office. I think the myth, the man, the legend here is America's, in some way, you can argue, the last and best hope. If we don't get him into office, it's going to be a pretty bad few decades at the least, if not much worse. There's nobody. I don't see any other plausible path toward victory. In any sense, like victory for us, victory for the world, victory for the planet. Without Bernie Sanders and progressives at the helm, we're not going to have the change we need to address the major problems we have. But that's going to be the topic of discussion. So let me see if I can get our guest on here. Hello?
Hi,
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing well, Steve. How's it going?
It's going good. I realized I might have wanted to ask a couple more questions before we did that, but I figured we'd just,
Hi.
introduce ourselves live. So I'm guessing you don't go by he.
I usually don't, but online it doesn't matter.
Okay. Uh, well, why don't you introduce yourself? Where do you come from? What part of the country you in? What do you want me to call you in this discussion? All that fun stuff.
Um, I'll stick with my online name, Eagle Wing Turtle. Vosh, if he refers to me, calls me Turtle Winged because it's shorter. Um, on that chat, I hail from the Midwest. I've pretty much been living around the Great Lakes for most of my life. So, water issues have always been very important to me. I've been an activist for all of my adult life. Even when I was a kid, I would go to the protests in Chicago against the war in Iraq when it first started. So I've been
Awesome.
in this for quite a while. Anything else you want to know?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll get to it. That's cool. So it sounds like you've always kind of been on the left. Is that accurate? Like were your parents on the left?
Oh, absolutely. They were definitely Democrats for a very long time, and really found the Green Party with the Nader election in 2000. And I was fairly apolitical for a while in school, and I just couldn't keep everything straight. So I kind of ducked out of politics for a number of years while getting my degree. And now that I'm past my undergraduate years, I'm realizing that the political is probably the most important thing that I need to be doing. So that's
Right?
how I got into it.
Yeah, that's what I don't understand because most people obviously aren't political. And I feel like people don't think politics affects their lives very much. And I don't understand how you can think that because if you're indoors, literally everything you can lay your eyes upon is affected by politics. Everything you buy, everything you spend money on, the money itself, the job, how much you take home, how much you pay in taxes, how much you pay in profit to corporations. There's the regulations that are involved in everything you buy. Politics goes deep. You know, the whole process of where things are built is affected by politics, where the jobs are affected by politics. Kind of blows my mind that more people aren't interested in politics, but I do think that's most likely because people feel like they're not represented by the government, and that would be because they aren't.
Yeah, I agree. I think that when I talk to people in real situations and they really don't like politics, when I say that I'm a very political person, a lot of people like give me a side eye and walk away. But then if I talk to them about an issue, any issue, um, no matter how small it is, that's politics too. And people don't really realize that either. They think that it has to have a partisan um, face in front of it for it to be political. But nonprofits are very political, and they consider themselves either apolitical or bipartisan because they don't back a face or a candidate,
Right.
and still they do very political work.
Certainly. I mean, if you look at, I mean, there's obviously different ways of using definitions. You know, in the broader realm, almost everything is politics. When nonprofits say they're not political, exactly, they're using a very strict definition that says they don't support specific candidates or parties. That doesn't mean you're not political. If you're a nonprofit that's, you know, trying to give women more access to healthcare, that's pretty political for a lot of people. So, you know, certainly goes deep. I come from a very different background. I'm not sure how familiar you are, but I, well, when I was like 5, my parents moved from Canada to the United States, and they quickly became Christians. They converted. They went to an evangelical church. Within a couple years, they were radicalized, and to the point that they didn't trust any schools at all. So I was homeschooled most of my life, and it was like evangelical conservative homeschooling. It was we would listen to Rush Limbaugh on the radio like almost every day, you know, like Michael Savage, G. Gordon Liddy. Got science education from Kent Hovind and Ken Ham and people like that. So it was pretty wild. I've always cared about truth. I've always cared about the world. I remember when I was like 12 listening to my dad because I used to like kind of hang out and listen to the adults talk a lot. So very serious child you could say. But I remember listening to my dad talk and it just seemed to me, I remember this very clearly. They were talking about all the problems in the country and how nothing's happening on them. I just It's like, why? Why is no progress being made? Like, if it's so obvious, the stuff that they're saying, why can't we get it done? And I even asked, and they said, well, because half the country doesn't agree with us. And that's when I learned about Democrats at the time. But it's always been wild to me that there's so much controversy in the country, and there really shouldn't be. You know, there's a truth, there's a right, there's a wrong, there's there's shades of gray, but there's a better and there's a best. So why is it everything so evenly split that we never have action? And it took me a long time as part of my worldview shift to where I am now, which, you know, obviously I'm a Bernie Sanders supporter. I'm not on the right anymore. Huge leftist. I'd call myself a libertarian market socialist. I agree with Vosh on pretty much everything. But as part of that kind of shift, I was paying attention to like the dynamics in society, and it seems to me like we're intentionally divided because there's powerful interests that don't want any type of change. So they, as long as there's enough division on both sides, nothing major changes, and that's what they want. And
I absolutely agree.
so yeah, so that's kind of, I guess, my introduction and your introduction. So you want to introduce your thoughts on Bernie Sanders and what we should be doing for this election?
Yeah, sure. So Bernie Sanders is a really interesting candidate and an interesting politician in general. He's got a very progressive history, and he has often been called one of the reasons that the Green Party is very lacking in his home state, because everybody loves Bernie and supports Bernie, and for good reason. He does have a lot of great things that he says, and he does a lot of the work that we want our politicians to do. I don't think that he's a bad guy or has a bad soul or anything like that. I think that he is one of the more honest politicians. Um, that
Certainly.
said, it's me a lot to know that he will not talk about the Green Party at all, even though the Green New Deal is a Green Party document that we wrote that was watered down by the Democratic Party, watered down by Democrats who introduced it. He doesn't talk about the Green Party at all. And even though that has helped us a little bit, that he's talked about our policies, so it's easier for me to go knock on somebody's door and talk about the Green New Deal and people know what it is. He's done the left a great disservice in leaving us out of the conversation. And I think that it's kind of by design. In order for him to run as a Democrat, he needs to
Certainly.
also toe that party line. And that's not doing us any favors past July. You and I both know that there's a large chance that he will not win in July, and then it's over. As you just said earlier, like a last hope for a lot of people. And the problem with that is after July, the world keeps moving, and we need
Right.
to have more strategies after that.
Right. And
Whether or
I
not,
think I agree that it's going to be pretty bad if he doesn't win the nomination. I just think that's why we need to fight for it harder. Not I don't disagree with the Green Party. I mean, I don't look into it too much, but I agree with the Bernie's not talking about it because he already gets flack from liberals for not being a Democrat. He's, you know, independent, and if he goes around talking about third parties, he would like lose half his support probably. So the real question here, to me, that's important to this discussion is the whole concept of trying to have a third party in what's undeniably a two-party system. Like, whether it's better than the Democratic Party's not super relevant to me if they can't win.
Well, it should be relevant either way, because whether we want to have a third party or another second party, um, having a party that actually does what we want it to do is really important. And neither of the two parties are willing to do what we want them to do. So we need a party that actually follows what people say and
I
really
100% agree.
advice from the movements. So in a winner take all system, you're right. It's really hard to have third and fourth and fifth parties that get a lot of the vote. However, it's just as legitimate as the Democratic and Republican parties, in that if it won, it won. There's a vote for the Green Party is not a vote for another party. It's a vote for the Green Party. And if 60% of America voted Green, we would have a Green president. We would have a Green congressperson. It's a false narrative to say that the Green Party is the only party that's a spoiler when the Democrat didn't win. So the Democrat could have been a spoiler for the Green.
Well, it is a two-party system, though. Like, just mathematically, just because of the rules of how it's set up. I kind of wanted to watch at least a chunk of this video. It's got almost 5 million views, and it explains the problems that most of us, why most of us aren't willing to consider a third party. So, do you mind if we watch it real quick and then you can respond?
Yeah, I can hear it from here. I don't have your video up as well because it was not on the same.
Yeah, I was gonna say you might want to mute your mic and then you can turn on the video and just watch it.
Okay, sure.
And then I'll bring you back on afterwards, or you can, if that works. It's like 5 minutes. All right, here we go.
First past the post voting explained by me, CGP Grey. The royal family has a problem, but this isn't just any royal family. These are the lions, rulers of the jungle since time immemorial. There are protests over.
So what I like about this is he's using metaphorical animal parties for a reason. So we're not going to get our biases involved here. We don't feel affiliated with any of them. This is just a mathematical argument. It's just animals.
For the monarchy's absolute power, and the citizens of the animal kingdom want a say in how they are governed. Bending to the pressure, Lion has abdicated his crown, and King is to be an elected office. To ensure a smooth transition, and because she is craftier than her husband, the Queen Lioness is remaining on the throne with the power to set the rules for all elections in her kingdom. She has declared that all citizens get one and only one vote, and that the candidate with the most votes wins the crown. This method of voting is most often called first past the post, awkwardly abbreviated as FPTP or winner take all. The system is simple, fair, and logical, right? Actually, no. It's a terrible, terrible idea. Why? Well, to see the problems with first past the post, let's watch the first election unfold in the animal kingdom. It's an exciting time for the burgeoning democracy, and 7 hopeful candidates come forward to run and represent their parties. They put on their best campaigns, citizens head out to the polls, and the votes are counted. The results come in.
Yeah, he says it really well. I want to at least keep my camera there. Sorry if it's blocking stuff a little bit, but hopefully it'll help me keep me from getting a copyright strike, especially if I'm doing a little commentary on it.
As follows. Turtle gets 9% of the vote, monkey gets 18, gorilla gets 19, owl gets 13, leopard gets 20, tiger gets 15, and snake gets 6. Under the rules of first past the post, leopard is crowned the winner and she gets to rule for the length of her term. But take another look at the results, and you'll see the first problem with this system: minority rule. The vast majority of citizens, 80%, wanted someone else as king, but leopard still won. There were only 7 candidates in this race, but if you imagine if there had been 20, she might have only gotten 5% of the vote, but still been elected. This problem of minority rule is only the beginning. The second problem with first past the post is that, given enough time, it results in an inevitable, unavoidable two-party system. Why? To see, let's watch what happens over several election cycles. Leopard has had her term in office, and it's again election time in the young democracy. Only now, all the citizens of Animal Kingdom remember the results from last time. This information changes how they'll behave, particularly snake and turtle voters, who must face the reality that they backed unappealing extremist candidates who don't have a chance of winning. Turtle voters, who were unhappy under leopard rule, decide to back the candidate who has the best chance of winning, gorilla. Now, snake voters want to vote for tiger, who is the candidate they have the most in common with, but they're afraid to because leopard is running a negative campaign against her competitors. Snake voters, not liking the idea of gorilla rule, vote strategically for leopard. The final result looks like this, with leopard getting 26% of the vote and gorilla getting 28%, making him the new king. Snake and turtle, seeing their dismal results and knowing the cost of their campaigns, decide to drop out of future races. What started out as a 7-party system is now down to 5. Fast forward to the next election. Only 5 candidates run, and again the voters remember what happened last time. In this election, it's owl voters who recognize that their candidate cannot win. They are centrist voters and less ideological than the rest of the animal kingdom. As such, they don't really like gorilla or leopard. Both gorilla and leopard know this, so they each run negative campaigns to capitalize on the fears of the centrists. Owl voters split their vote and are mostly voting against the candidate they dislike rather than supporting the candidate they do like. After this election, gorilla gets 33% of the vote and leopard gets 34%, making her the winner. Owl, as did turtle and snake before her, drops out of the race. In the last election we'll look at, monkey and tiger voters are unhappy. They both really like the candidates they have supported, but they now have to compromise. Monkey voters agree with gorilla on few issues, but they really don't like leopard. And tiger voters agree with leopard on some issues, but they really don't like gorilla. They strategically abandon their preferred candidate out of fear of the one they disagree with the most becoming king. The final results are leopard 49% and gorilla 51%, with him being crowned the king. Monkey and tiger are the last candidates to drop out, and now the animal kingdom is left with a 2-party system. Because of the centrist and swayable owl voters, in future elections, leopard might take the crown, then gorilla wins it back, only to lose it to leopard again, but the 2 parties never change. The citizens of Animal Kingdom ended up with the system, not because they are lazy voters or because that's what they really wanted, but because the mathematics of how the system is set up. Inevitably, given enough time, all first-past-the-post systems trend towards 2 main parties. But the choices of the voters still hasn't changed since that first election. Only 2/5 of them wanted either leopard or gorilla as their first choice, and 3/5 of them wanted someone else as their first choice. It's this majority of the voters that becomes disinterested in the democratic process because they feel they have no meaningful way to express their real preferences. But it only gets worse from here. If the citizens of Animal Kingdom are divided into groups.
Yeah, it looks just like our system, doesn't it? More people didn't vote for Trump and Hillary than voted for both of them combined. So we have more non-voters than we have voters, and that's because people don't feel represented. It's a horrible system, and we need to change it. Bernie Sanders, along with a lot of candidates, have supported ranked choice alternative voting, but most politicians I wouldn't trust with that at all, because as soon as they get into office, they don't want to change the system that got them elected. Bernie Sanders is the only politician I would trust on that because he's demonstrated integrity since the dinosaurs roamed the earth.
Before they vote, they are susceptible to gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is a bit tricky, but imagine a block of 10 homes, each with 1 voter inside. 3 are leopard voters, 3 are gorilla voters, and 4 are owl voters. If they're divided up into groups before they vote, whoever decides where the lines are drawn has enormous influence over who wins the election. For example, if you group the 3 leopard voters with the 2 owl voters, and do the same with the 3 gorilla voters, you can eliminate owl from the election, even though owl voters have the largest minority and would win under a straight first-past-the-post vote. If the leopard or gorilla parties are in charge when the voting boundaries are drawn, they have enormous incentive to carve out safe seats for themselves. But more on gerrymandering in another video. Bah, I hear you say, vote third party and change the system. This brings us to the final and possibly worst problem of first-past-the-post, the spoiler effect. Imagine now that it's been years and years of gorilla or leopard rule. Tiger decides it's time to enter the race. He thinks that the voters are tired of the status quo and he has a shot at winning. He sets up his campaign office, gets a surprising amount of gold and donations, and gets on the Animal News Network to debate with the main candidates. Election night comes around, but alas, Tiger gets only 15% of the vote, mostly from leopard voters who are closest to him on the political spectrum. Gorilla easily beats leopard and gets to be king. This is the first-past-the-post system at its worst. The better a third-party candidate does, the more it hurts its own voters by guaranteeing a loss for the party they most agree with and a win for the party they most disagree with. And don't forget, Gorilla is no fool. He knows how the system works. Where do you think some of those gold donations came from? Meanwhile, the Queen Lioness is displeased. She's been observing the elections and sees that the system is bad for her subjects. And she's been thinking, what makes a good voting system? Well, you should be able to vote for the candidate who you like the most without worrying. More choice in representatives is better. The system shouldn't be susceptible to gerrymandering, and it should be open to new political parties. Luckily for the Queen, there are several different voting systems to choose from, including the alternative vote, but that will have to be discussed in detail at another time. Thank you very much for watching.
CJP Gray is awesome. He has very informative videos about a lot of things. If you keep watching, he has more videos that discuss ranked choice voting, mixed member proportional voting, other voting systems like that, and it's highly recommended. Alrighty, did I lose Turtle Wing?
I'm still here.
Oh, awesome. So that's probably all pretty familiar to you, but I think that's a pretty fair summary of how most people are thinking about the third party. So I think it's a good introduction to discussing it.
I think that's how a lot of people do think about it. I think it's way too simplistic, though. Also, they threw in some accusations there, like a whole bunch of donations are probably coming from Republicans then to boost the Green Party. This came from the Guerrilla Party to boost the other one.
Yeah,
Absolutely not true at all.
I don't think it's an accusation against the Green Party. At least I didn't hear it like that. I do not think that Republicans are going to support the Green Party just because they don't want those ideas even being talked about. They don't want to platform the rhetoric that's, good. It shifts the Overton window. But, in a purely mathematical sense, it makes sense to sometimes do that, depending on the situation in history. So I think it's a legitimate concern.
At the moment, I live in a very conservative district. I often have to talk to a lot of conservatives, a lot more than liberals. And they are just as concerned about a lot of the issues that we are. Sometimes because Limbaugh is such a big part of their lives, they don't see it in the same way. But it only takes a 5-minute conversation before we're talking about too much plastic in the lake, the horrible
on the issues,
energy and all kinds of things like that.
One of my favorite YouTube channels is Secular Talk, and Kyle Kalinske is like his whole view of how he runs his channel. If you've watched enough of his videos, is he just wants the left to win. So he's what he calls a populist leftist, and he constantly talks about how most of the positions of Bernie Sanders and progressives are actually popular with the majority of the country. And that, we can't accept the label fringe leftist because we're not. This is what the majority of the people want. So I'm right there with you on the issues, and I think most people are too. On most people, if they had a choice and they didn't think they would spoil the election, I think a lot of people would vote green and potentially get some green people in there, at least, in different levels of politics, if not, the presidency. But that's a big if, and as long as the system is the way it is, I don't think it's going to happen. But that doesn't mean we don't have hope. I did want to bring up something from my background. So, like I said, I grew up Republican, and my whole life, I heard more shit talking on the Republican Party than I did Democrat Party, because we were part of the burgeoning Tea Party movement before they had any power in government. It was all the moderate Republicans selling out to the oligarchs, and they're not representing us. They preach a good game, but then they get in Congress and they do the opposite, and they're compromising with the liberals and all. I heard this so much. It sounded so much like what the leftists talking about now. But what's happened since then? They've taken over the party. The entire party votes as a block now for the Tea Party. Like they used to be much more mixed. Like every time you had a vote, you'd have dozens of Democrats and Republicans on both sides that would be voting for the other side of issues. It was a lot less like just strict party line voting. So that's amazing. And I think that's proof that we can take over parties and change their entire identity if we keep up the fight within the party. So we have this proof that that can happen in modern history. And I don't see proof that we can have a third party take over without costing us the election for several cycles. Because it's mathematical. What if the Green Party was to do it like 3 times better than they've ever done and get like 15% of the vote, and then Trump gets another 4 years, what's Trump's going to do with 4 years in office? Well, the conservatives have been concerned for my whole life about the demographic shift and how eventually it's going to make it so Republicans don't stand a chance. That's why they preach this ethno-state type of rhetoric about immigration and stuff. They want to stop the demographic change. And if they're in power, they can. They control immigration policies. They can also change voting rights legislation to decrease the effect of those changes. And the longer they're in power, the less likely we have of getting them out of power. This is how fascist one-party systems begin. Once they're in full enough power, they start changing the laws to where they can't get out of power. And that's, I think, the huge concern now. We don't have time to play a couple decade-long game to try to make the Green Party replace the Democratic Party.
Well, I think you've got a couple things wrong there. For one thing, the Tea Party is not like any movement in the Democratic Party. It's backed by a lot of money. It was a grassroots movement, but like a racist kind of grassroots movement. At least part of it was. And again, it's backed by money that the progressives don't have. That's part of why we're progressive. We don't take money from giant corporations.
Sure.
And when most of the money is in the corporation.
Substantive difference, actually. I mean, this is why I liked using the examples with the animals that's not partisan, because really it's a mathematical issue that has, like, the actual policy positions doesn't have much to do with it. And the dollars do, but that's just a representation of influence. It's not necessarily a substantive difference, because the progressives might not have the money, but we do have the people. Our policies are popular with the majority of the country.
The qualitative issues have way more to do than any mathematical occurrence, because people don't have to vote. People will stay home.
Yep.
Most people did not vote for either Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. And probably in this election, most people, the biggest block of people who could vote, will not vote, especially if the Democrat is a regular neoliberal like they have been for the last 30 years or so.
I really think if Bernie Sanders isn't the nominee, that we will have another 4 years of Trump. Like, full stop. I don't think anybody else will be able to beat Trump. Right now, Biden is the only one who competes with Bernie head-to-head with Trump, but get him up there on a stage with Trump and Trump will destroy him, because Trump's strengths are throwing mud and playing reality star. And Biden's got plenty. Biden can't attack Trump without looking bad himself on those same issues, because he's got the same corruption at a lesser scale. But Bernie doesn't have that, so he can stand up there and talk about issues and ignore any mud Trump's throwing, and Trump can't talk issues to save his freaking life. So I really think Bernie is the only one who would win that matchup. So to me, the future is the rise of fascism with Trump or Bernie. And I can't imagine the Green Party is going to be able to, no matter what we do, make a difference in that equation.
Well, if Bernie doesn't win in July, which is a very real possibility, we know that the Democrats do not like him, do not want him in that position. He's an outsider. And And it would be like somebody, let's say Hillary Clinton, deciding all of a sudden that she wanted to be in the Republican Party. She's just got the blue suit and has had the blue suit for 30, for how many years that she's been in politics, that to change and take over a party like that is really, it's unlikely to actually work. The Democratic Party is not set up to be democratic, just as the Republican Party is not set up to be democratic. And so to rely on primaries is really nearsighted. And then you will have a matchup between a neoliberal and Trump, and there won't be any progressive.
If we're looking at probabilities, I don't know that you. Maybe I should back up. I think, and I want to do a video on this at some point, because I think this is one of the most important kind of heuristics of critical thinking that we need to apply. Is anytime you're trying to logically consider a question, we can never consider one thing by itself. If we need to, that's why in science you never just put forth a hypothesis and then argue for it. You have to compare the hypothesis versus the null hypothesis, or if there isn't a null hypothesis, the strongest competing hypothesis, because those two things contradict. So if we're considering probabilities here, we're weighing the strength, the possibility of the Green Party making a beneficial impact on the election versus Bernie winning the nomination on the Democratic side.
It's more than that.
I don't think you can make an argument that the Green Party has a better chance than Bernie.
Green Party has already made a positive impact in elections past and as we go into 2020. So to say that all of a sudden we'll stop making a positive impact is kind of ridiculous. The only reason we have a Green New Deal, the only reason that we're talking about Medicare for all and talking about free college and all of these policies is because when Jill Stein was talking about them 8 years ago, the Democrats were laughing at her and saying that was crazy.
Oh, right. I mean, they've done good things in terms of moving the Overton window. I'm talking about like stopping Trump and making like winning elections, not just like rhetoric. If the Green Party backs Bernie in a strong way now, that can make the difference between him being the nominee and not. And he's surging right now. He has more volunteers and donors than anybody by far, like double, triple. He's surging in the first 3 states, and he has every chance in the world to win the first 3 states. And if he wins Iowa, New Hampshire, and Nevada, then media won't be able to keep from talking about him. And that's only going to help him further. But speaking of this, the shifts in the Overton window, there's a lot of good people in the Green Party, and they do a lot of good things just by talking about their issues, like I've already conceded. That's 100% true. But in terms of moving the Overton window, I don't think anybody in my entire lifetime has moved the Overton window and changed the conversation more than Bernie Sanders by running in the primary in 2016. Imagine what happens if he's the nominee. There is 4 times more attention in terms of dollar and media minutes and everything else on a general election than a primary. The Overton window would shift so much when people hear him talking about issues that they like. Like polling shows the majority of people like these issues. And if he's in a general election, there's going to be so much more turnout than there would any other time. And if he was in the presidency from the bully pulpit, throwing press conferences and talking to all the people, and if we have him tweeting instead of Trump, I think we're going to have so much more change than anything else we can imagine. And the stakes have never been higher. We have the rise of fascism, we have climate change, and the vastly increasing wealth inequality, which is causing this power difference between we the people and the oligarchs. So with the stakes this high, I think we have to back what I think is the best odds, which is Bernie. A lot of people are already calling him a front runner just on the strength of his support. He has a real chance to win this. If we got just a good portion of the Green Party to back Bernie Sanders right now, he can win this. and he agrees with you on basically all your policies. Now, I don't
It's
even
not.
want to talk about what happens if he doesn't win, because I think it's going to be a catastrophic future I don't want to envision, no matter what we do. But if he does lose, and you're not in a swing state, I think you can make a good argument for voting Green. But if you're in a swing state, I have to say any candidate's better than Trump, because he could not be causing fascism to rise faster if he was trying to intentionally. Whether he is or not, regardless.
Oh, do you
He's an
believe that
existential
Hillary
threat,
Clinton would have been a better president?
without a doubt.
And why do you
Hillary would
think
be
that?
more of the same. She would be status quo, which is horrible. But Trump is making real changes in how it's fascism. He's weaponizing tribalism. He's scapegoating minorities. He's putting people in concentration camps. He's starting war with Iran. He's
You
been
know which
demonizing the
president?
press and attacking institutions of government. He seized the power of the purse from Congress with a national emergency that's never been done before. No one's ever
Do you
done a
know which
national emergency on
president?
something Congress has spoken on already.
You know which president is known as the deporter in chief?
Right. And he did a lot of
That would be
deportations,
Barack
mostly
Obama.
criminals. He didn't have nearly the same scale of detentions, and the conditions were not nearly so bad. He wasn't splitting up families. Like, this stuff has escalated 10, 100 times under Trump because of his rhetoric and because of he has a literal white nationalist in charge of immigration policy in Stephen Miller.
Well, I don't disagree with that, but Obama was nearly just as bad. A lot of this stuff did start under Obama. He expanded the wars under everybody's nose, and nobody said a word. Um, he has a Nobel Peace Prize, and he did all of those things.
I am not here to
He
defend Obama. He
uh,
is pretty
he was
bad.
not a very good president.
I
He was a
agree.
disappointment. He was a disappointment to the Black communities who voted for him. When I was petitioning in 2012 for Jill Stein, I came across tons of Black voters who were like, "Of course I'll support Jill Stein. Barack Obama did nothing for me. Um, he was such a disappointment," and that's because he was a neoliberal. Um, like Trump is. Trump is also a neoliberal, in my opinion. He's got the same kinds of policies. Obviously, they're far more fascistic in their rhetoric, but that's kind of what neoliberalism leads us to is fascism. So we've already been dealing with this for
Right.
20, 30 years. I mean, it's no accident that we're seeing that the Trumps and the Clintons have been friends for decades. They're all in the same big club. Let's not kid ourselves. The Democrats and the Republicans are two sides of the same coin. And
Establishment
to then
Democrats
say,
certainly are, but the progressive movement is rising and it's threatening the establishment, just like the Tea Party did.
every time we hear this, though, we heard this with people like Dennis Kucinich. We heard this with tons of people way back since McGovern. That there's all these great progressive movements, and they always fizzle out because the Democratic Party is not a democracy. It's not an accident that there's a ridiculous number of Democratic candidates as supposed front runners of the party this
Absolutely.
election.
And that's
It's
because of
because
money in politics. It's because we don't live in a democracy, we live in an oligarchy. That's why we have to change the system. And I think Bernie is our best chance at doing that.
what I was
He
going to
has a
say
real
about
chance to win the nomination, and he's
those
running
20
on our
candidates or
dollars.
so, they're there to split that vote in the Democratic primary so that the super delegates get their chance to weigh in.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that because I don't know if you hold this position, but I hear a lot of the "I'm too left to vote for Bernie" types say that he sold out to endorse Hillary Clinton and stuff like this. Whether that's your position or not, I think it's really important everybody knows what happened in 2016 because he was taking a huge amount of heat from the entire Democratic establishment to drop out and endorse Hillary before the convention, and he refused to. And he kept fighting all the way to the convention, and he went to the negotiating table with leverage, and every other politician in the history of America's, from my limited knowledge, when they get to that position, what they're negotiating for is their career. They say, make me vice president, I'll endorse you. Make me secretary of state, I'll endorse you. Fund my campaign, I'll endorse you. That's not what Bernie Sanders did. Bernie Sanders said, eliminate super delegates so that the people have a freaking chance next time. He used his entire influence to give us a chance. It wasn't about him. It's never been about him. And because of that, if you go back to 2015, you can Google it. I have articles from November, December, before a single vote had been cast. They were saying Hillary had this 300 delegate lead. And it's hard to overcome that because nobody believed Bernie had a chance. And when people have trouble believing he has a chance, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And that's why he didn't really have a chance. But he's eliminated that. Now, you're 100% right. They come back in the second round. But just eliminating him from the first round is a massive difference that actually gives us a chance this time. So if Bernie wins the most delegates, which I think is very probable, but if he doesn't win over 51%, which again is very probable, then the voting will go to a second round. And if it goes to a second round, if we know that's going to happen, we need to all be in Milwaukee and we need to be ready to protest this. Because if there's 500,000 pissed off Bernie supporters outside and progressives, that's the only way we can get them in there. If we're vibrating the freaking building with our chants, then they'll have that's the only way they'll do it. Because you and I both know the establishment would absolutely screw the will of the people in order to not have a progressive in there. Speaking of which, I'm going to put a link in Discord chat to a server that just started called Milwaukee Vacation, because this is something we want to start planning for now.
I'm already planning to be there, but I have no doubts that in a second round, it would go to an establishment candidate, no matter how loud the people shout, because the people have been shouting loudly for 20 years now, and it has not made a difference. There are a lot of videos talking about the corruption, about anti-corruption, that talks about how only 30% of the Americans' will is carried out. Whether it's something that they hate or love, 30% will pass. And it's true. I've been on calls with senators and Congress people that are like, supposedly they're reaching out to the people, and they don't care about anything that anybody says.
Totally. And you said earlier that
in the second race,
you seem to be implying that there isn't anything different this time, but I think there is. The Bernie Sanders run in 2016 has strengthened the left so much. We're seeing it rise all over the place. We're seeing a burgeoning movement where he has more support than anybody. We have a handful of real progressives in Congress, and even just that limited handful has been huge because they're able to stand up there and give the people a voice in Congress. They're able to record stuff in Congress live and like send it out to people. They're able to introduce legislation, which then puts the establishment in the awkward position of having to deny it, and it puts them on the record for doing so. Ro Khanna, AOC, Ilhan Omar, like these people are making a difference. And if we keep this movement up, we can do what the Tea Party did. We can take over the Democratic Party. There's nothing making it impossible. We've already had strong systemic change. Bernie already won that for us in 2016. There's no superdelegates until the second round of voting.
Well, they did all vote against the Green New Deal when it came through the House. They
Exactly.
could have voted yes.
But we wouldn't have had that vote without progressives in Congress. When we
That
put
may be
people on the
true,
record,
but
it helps us
nobody voted
primary
yes
them.
for it.
There's progressives in primaries all around the nation, and I encourage anyone watching now or watching in the future, Google who's running in your area and find out who's voting, because there's a lot of progressives that we can be supporting. And that's all establishment types fear, is a primary from the left. And that's our best chance at doing anything. AOC dethroned the third most powerful Democrat in Congress. Nobody thought that would happen. Right now, I'm supporting, I think it's Shahid Buttar, who is Nancy Pelosi's progressive challenger, and that would be epic if he won. I don't think he's going to win, unfortunately, but I'm still going to support him. And the more successful he is, the more that helps Democrats. It's not a either or game. Just having that support makes them stronger. While I support the rhetoric of the Green Party, just because of the nature of our voting system, I think our chances of taking over, and I think reality's showing this, our chances are better of taking over the party from within than trying to replace it. We have real progressives in Congress. Bernie won like 40% of the delegates or whatever in 2016. I'm not seeing that kind of chance with the Green Party, unfortunately.
Well, it's really hard to have some empirical evidence about how the Green Party would do if people actually decided to support it.
Right, but that's my point. It's a
Since
hypothetical.
our
They
infancy
don't.
in 2000, since the first time that we ever had a presidential candidate who never actually ran, who never actually joined the Green Party, by the way, we never really had the support of the left as a whole group. And that's been because there's always been a progressive enough Democratic candidate, and for 20 years or more, people have been saying, we'll vote green next time. It's more important for us to vote for the Democrat now. In fact, I'll tell you about Bruce Hinkforth. He's one of the founders of the Democratic or the Green Party. And he talked just this last year about how he has this friend who was trying to change the Democratic Party from the inside. He had this great story about it, how he was working so hard. And then he revealed that was in the 70s. So I cannot go every single election over and over again doing the same thing, voting for the progressive Democrat, and thinking that's going to have different results. That to me is madness. To really have a truly progressive party taking over
Doesn't
and
that exact same logic work towards voting for the Green Party? Because people have been voting for the Green Party for a long time too, and nothing's changed.
some people have, but in order to build a movement, you have to keep saying a lot of the same message over and over again. As we know about Bernie Sanders, he's been repeating a lot of the same talking points for years and years. That's because a lot of people are just hearing it for the first time. My biggest problem when I go out talking to people in the streets is a lot of people still have no idea that there is such a thing as the Green Party. It's not taught in schools that this is even a political party. It's not a regular thing. When people hear polls, when they're called up for polls, nobody says, are you going to vote for the Green Party candidate? That's not even a choice. And if you say that you're not voting for the two options, you're voting for the Green Party, that doesn't exist in most polls. So to exclude the party from the national conversation, and also in your video on the mathematics, they excluded the Green Party there too. They said, oh, well, this smaller party got in the debate. No, we haven't gotten in the debate. We've been arrested at every single debate that we've tried to get into. And on the state level, most debates are owned by the private industry and don't have to let anybody in.
Right,
So
but
there's a
this is
lot of
the
against
reason
us,
for
but
all this
that has
action you're
nothing
talking
to do
about
with
here
the
is
democracy. That has everything to do with the establishment.
it has
Does that
everything to
make
do
sense?
with the reality of the system we're in. That's the point of the video we watched. Like, it is a two-party system. The reason nobody supports the Green Party is because we know that if we do, it's only going to hurt the Democratic Party, which is going to allow the GOP to win. Like, that's just the math. You can say that, well, if 60% of people supported the Green Party, they'd win. And that's true, but we also know that's not going to happen. Jill Stein got 1% of the vote in 2016. She'd have to do, what, 50 times better to have a chance? It's just not going to happen. Whereas Bernie is this close to bringing true change to the entire country.
Well, you can't have
a
both
few people
ways.
in the right place can make the difference right now.
insignificant?
If you and your friends drive to like anybody who's within driving distance of Iowa, New Hampshire, or Nevada, if you go there and canvass, you can make a difference right now, because it's going to be really narrow margins that dictate who wins this. And if he wins the first 3 states, he can win the whole enchilada. He's this close. Jill Stein has never been close to anything, unfortunately, as much as I like her. Look at the stakes of this election. All of the scientific consensus says we have 10 years to make a real change, or it's going to be a lot worse in 50 years when it comes to climate change.
Look at the stakes of any other election in the last 30 years.
No other election has had a scientific consensus saying we have 10 years to save the planet. That is new.
Same exact rhetoric, though.
It's not rhetoric, though. This is
Plan
science.
is not going to help us as much as the Greens will. The Greens have done the math to make sure that we are on point with figuring out climate change. In fact, Howie Hawkins has his entire point-by-point plan of the Green New Deal and how his eco-socialist Green New Deal will stay with the timeline that we're given. That's not what happened in Bernie Sanders' timeline. He's waiting till 2050 to take care of everything. I mean, he's not waiting the whole time, but it's not, his plan doesn't completely work until 2050, while the Green Plan works by 2030, which is the timeline that we're given.
The Green Party plan doesn't work at all if it doesn't win, which it won't win. Climate change isn't an all or nothing thing. Any change we make will make the effects of climate change, it'll stall it more, it'll give us more time, and it'll reduce the damage of it. So it's not a win or lose thing. It's not like if we have a plan in place that does 50% of the work but not all of it, then we're all going to die anyway. No, it makes a difference. And since he has a chance to win,
closer to all or nothing, then incremental change will do something. A lot of people are saying that we're already screwed no matter what.
Unless Bernie wins.
Think about all or nothing.
Just imagine what happens again if Bernie Sanders wins, and he's close. If you support him and a few of your friends support him, that could make the difference. And if he wins the nomination and then is in the general, and there's far more tension on a general, just that the change in the Overton window that will happen just by him being there is going to be huge. And if he won the presidency, I'm not saying he's going to pass all his policies, because obviously we need to retake Congress too. But just him being there and having executive orders and talking from the bully pulpit and moving the Overton window, because none of this stuff that needs to happen is going to happen if we don't change the conversation. If we don't change the Overton window, we have no chance at a future. So when we're betting the future of the planet, I want to support the person who almost won, the person nobody had heard of, and yet almost beat the most powerful politician in United States history in 2016, than the person who had 1% of the vote. There's too much at stake here.
There's a few points that you had in there. Let me try and address all of them. One thing, what you're asking is that the Greens leave their party and destroy it in order to maybe possibly get one Democratic candidate past the primary. That to me seems like a terrible bet to take. Um,
Well, that's only if you're deeply invested in the idea of a party succeeding instead of actual change in policies succeeding.
if you know anything about the American system, you can only really do things by party.
Yep.
Anytime you
It,
have independents running, they may be great people, but they're only one person. And after that person, nobody else gets to pick up the mantle and continue. When you have a
well,
party doing
your
that
framing of
work,
this is a little dishonest. It's not that you need to do it with a party, it's that you need to do it in one of the two parties because it's a two-party system.
you have to do it in a party. Now, being a third party is much harder because getting on the ballot is way harder. There is absolutely no media coverage on us most of the time. We are often arrested at the outside of the debates, things
Right.
going against us. But
And
the
all
more
of those
we
are
get out
systemic
of this
issues that will
and
not
show
go away. That's
and
my
show that
question.
we have problems with our democracy rather than saying, oh, well, that's too bad. Why don't we just like forget about that and work on this other issue? That's not going to cut it because we wouldn't say that about like having some part of slavery in the United States. Well, it didn't work everywhere, but let's just keep moving on this other issue. No, it's an all or nothing thing. Either we have a democracy or we don't. And we cannot just move forward saying, oh, well, we can't have some people running for office in some contexts. That's too bad for them. Let's keep moving on with our system. That's not going to cut it for me.
Well, it's unfortunately a two-party system, so the only way to change it is from one of the parties. And I agree, a huge issue for me, and it should be a huge issue for everybody who cares about anything politically, especially leftist, is that we need to change the voting system because the Green Party should have a chance. If we had ranked choice voting, the Green Party would have a caucus in Congress guaranteed. I don't know if they'd win the presidency, but they'd probably have 20 to 50 or 100 seats in Congress and they would have some power because people would choose them. But until we change that, you don't have a chance because the logic we're seeing from the video and that I'm repeating is what everybody knows is just true. There's no chance Jill Stein wins in 2020. There's just there's no
Well,
chance.
that's true because she's not running.
Or the
It's
Green
how
Party, I should say.
Mario.
I don't know who's running because it doesn't matter. They don't have stand a
It
chance.
absolutely matters. To say that certain candidates just don't even matter that they're running for office is also incredibly undemocratic. It sounds like 90% of your points against me are a Democratic talking point that says it's a two-party system. So too bad for you.
Well, it's not
Um,
Democratic Party.
don't
We
have any
demonstrated
real
this with animal parties. It has nothing to do with propaganda. This is just a
this
function
topic.
of the math.
It's not a function of the math because there are many different angles to politics and there are a lot of reasons that people vote or don't vote. And so we can't say that people are always going to appeal to the color blue or the color red forever and ever. These two parties have put themselves in positions that are so unpopular that most people are not Republicans or Democrats. Most people have registered as independents or have not registered by party. So to say that the Democrats and the Republicans own all of the votes, even though most people don't like either party, most people don't want to vote for either party, and then disallow other parties from even trying to enter and saying, oh, you should just support a progressive in the Democratic Party, it's incredibly undemocratic of you.
Well, it's not undemocratic. It's pragmatic. We have the first past the post system.
How did that
We
pragmatism
have
work in
demonstrated
2016?
within modern history that parties can take over their party from within. Parties have evolved throughout the entire history of our process, and yet third parties winning has only happened like twice. There's been like two massive time, like the Civil War, I think, was caused some effects that caused like the old Whig
So
Party
you
to
mean the
turn into
little
one.
thing
But
called the Republican Party?
yeah, it's been a
That one?
long freaking time since anything has changed in regard to the party structure.
It's
So
about time
when
that
it
we have a
comes to
different one, right?
probabilities of change, which matter, I don't see how you're making an argument here. You're kind of making a feelings based argument that, well, they should get a fair shot. But why should they get a fair shot if they're just going to be a spoiler effect and let Trump win? That's what will
That's the
happen.
Democratic talking point, the spoiler
It's not a
effect.
talking
That
point
they're
when it's
just going
true.
to be a spoiler. It's not true. Show me it's true that the Greens have been spoiling these races.
How long has I'm not saying they have spoiled the race. I'm just saying if they were more successful, they would spoil the race. That's a very different thing. Because I agree, I don't think they've spoiled anything in the past. And most of their votes are just protest votes from states that aren't swing states, and that's perfectly fine. I might vote Green myself because California is not a swing state. It doesn't matter what I do. In terms of the general, in the primary, it makes a huge difference. How long has the Green Party been here? It was founded in 2001, and they've got up to 1% in the presidential race. If they got up to 10%, where would those votes come from?
Probably people that would have voted Bernie, a lot of other progressives, but also conservatives too that are really upset with the system and haven't even been voting for a long time. Because it seems like a lot of conservatives either vote for the Republican Party just because that's what their family does and that's what they were. The conservative way is kind of about loyalty, or they don't vote at all. And we're finding that there are a lot of conservatives looking for new parties and just have never even heard of the Green Party. But once they hear about us, there are a lot of fishermen, there are a lot of hunters, there are a lot of people that need clean water and clean air just like everybody else, and will vote green because we
Like I
care
said,
about those things.
I grew up conservative. Most of my friends and family are still conservative. They've heard of the Green Party and they think they're like ultra fringist left, like fringe crazy people, and they won't even listen to anything from them. So I don't think you're winning any conservatives. But if Democrats vote for the Green Party in the general election, those are votes that aren't going to the Democratic nominee. And I don't know how you can pretend they have a chance when you had 1% of the vote last time. Like
They wouldn't go to the Democratic nominee either way.
Well, yeah, if people aren't going to vote regardless and they want to vote Green, sure, cool. But, most people who vote are going to vote either Democrat or Republican. That's just the way it be.
What you're saying is that anybody who votes green is like a bad person for voting green. But if they weren't going to vote anyway, then maybe they should vote green. You can't have it both ways. You either like the fact that people are voting and want them to vote in any way that they feel they should, or you think that all their votes
I
should
think
belong to
people
the
should be
Democratic
able to
Party.
vote any way they like, which is why we need to get people who can actually win to then change the system so it's a ranked choice system and we can actually vote our conscience. Because the system we have now isn't that. We know the chance of Green Party winning in a general is just non-existent. Whereas the chance of them spoiling an election and having another 4 years of Trump, which he could, he has done so much fascist rhetoric in the last 3 years. I don't think that our system of government would survive another 4. Like the Green Party never seems to be willing to admit that the stakes have changed. Like this, I know these are arguments you've been hearing for decades. That doesn't mean they're not more true now than they have been in the past. Climate change has
The
gotten more
Democratic
serious.
Party
The
is
rise of fascism has gotten more serious. If Trump wins, 2020 will be the most fair election we have for decades, and it won't be a very fair election already. So we're already fighting stacked odds. If he wins and they do more voting restrictions, if they get more Supreme Court justices and more judges throughout the country.
Well, the Dems have been kind of complicit in voting restrictions too. Don't put that all in the Republican Party.
Which is why we need to take over the Democratic Party and get some progressives in there.
The Democratic Party is unwilling to admit that it needs more progressives. Every election.
Fortunately for us, they don't control elections. Like they didn't want AOC to win either, but she did. They didn't want Bernie Sanders to be relevant, but he almost took it from Hillary, which nobody saw coming. Can we agree that that was a tremendous occasion? Like, Hillary had more political machinery and donations and backers than any candidate for president probably in history. She was the strongest political machine we've seen. And somebody nobody had ever heard of that everyone thought was the crazy socialist from Vermont gave her a real run for her money. Like he secured like 20 something states. Nobody saw that coming. That was huge. And unfortunately the Green Party hasn't done this, and they won't do this for the exact same reasons that the CGP Grave video talked about. Like, it's just nobody believes that the Green Party stands a chance, because when you look at the math, it doesn't seem like they do.
Why do you think that the Democrats, even though they couldn't see it coming, that there were some progressives that were going to get some real power in the party, and that kind of remains to be seen, how much power they have in the party.
Bernie,
why do you think that
the fact that we don't have super delegates,
that's a possibility, but you don't think it's a possibility that the Greens can come out of nowhere and become relevant?
Because of the arguments from the system against the relevance of a third party. It is a two-party system. Everybody's very well familiar with this. This video has 5 million views. A lot of people have seen it. A lot of people are familiar with the rationale, even if they haven't seen it. And we can look at the past and say, oh, the Green Party's 1-2% of the vote. They're probably not going to win 50% of it. It's just a systemic fact. You're not going to overcome that barrier because it's a systemic barrier.
Oh, both of us are arguing about systemic barriers.
But one of us has empirical evidence that we've changed it. Like, Bernie has changed the Democratic Party. He eliminated superdelegates. That's real structural systemic change.
That's not real systemic change. If he had eliminated all superdelegates forever, no matter what the circumstances, maybe that's real change, but he didn't do that. He only eliminated that in the first vote, which is why the Democratic field is littered with stupid candidates that nobody cares about, because they're going to steal a little bit of that vote, and there's not going to be enough for anybody to win that first vote.
That's their plan. I agree. I think that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to split the vote. That's why we have more people jumping in. We got billionaires jumping in all over the place, it seems like. But that doesn't change that he still has a far better chance, and he did do real systemic change. Eliminating superdelegates from the first round is huge, because now they can't pretend Biden has an unrecoverable lead. Like, you can look at articles. Actually, I think the first one was July 2015, like 6 months before the first votes cast. And they're already talking about how Hillary had a superdelegate lead that couldn't be overcome. That keeps people from voting. It suppresses the movement. And I guarantee if there weren't superdelegates in the first round, Bernie Sanders would have won in 2016. That is a huge change. That is real systemic change that happened because progressives tried to change the party from within. And I think the reality demonstrates that's the path of action that's going to have the best probability of success for us. And if Bernie loses, you know, I think everybody who's not in a swing state should probably should vote green. You should cast a protest vote and screw the Democrat Party in the general. But I'm never
Protest.
going to support them during a primary season because we need to be doing what we can that math and logic and reality shows us is going to have the best chance of success, which is action from within the party. We know we can win primaries because we have. We don't know that we can win in a third party because we never do.
Not at the presidential level, but Greens actually win quite a few races on the local level already. Um, Pretty much, we've had a couple of really good green sweeps in the Midwest lately. Madison has a green mayor in Wisconsin, and much of the city council is also green. In races that we enter, we win most of the time, especially if there doesn't have to be a G in front of our names.
Certainly.
I think that is mostly because we have been told over and over by the media for the last 20 years that Greens are spoilers, Greens are protests. If you vote Green, you're protesting, and that it's not a legitimate vote, that your vote is it should be owned by the Democratic or Republican parties, and not that the Greens are actually legitimate candidates with legitimate concerns. The
Well,
only reason
I
that you're
agree the
talking
Green
about
Party can
ranked
win in
choice
local
voting is
elections.
because that's what the Green parties have been championing for the last 15 years.
When you have a national organization putting its weight behind local candidates, it makes it possible for them to win, and they do, and they can. That's a whole different dynamic than national elections, which is still true. Now, even if it was not true, when everybody believes it, you're not going to change this belief in a matter of a few months. People don't believe a third party can win it at the national level. Personally, I think next to Bernie Sanders, the second most important organization to support is Justice Democrats, because they're all about primarying establishment Democrats who are corrupt, and they're the organization that helped AOC win. So when it's the same dynamic basically as the Green Party. It's a national organization funded from all over the country, but they target specific candidates at the primary level, and they apply their influence in a very strategic way that works. And it works for the Green Party too at the local level. And if the Green Party jumped into primaries, they could be doing the same thing. They could put their weight behind progressive candidates at the primary level as well. But as long as you're a third party, you're not going to have national relevance.
If the Green Party jumped into Democratic primaries, it would by definition not be its own party anymore.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the idea party isn't nearly as important as the change we need to make to the world. It's the policies. I would vote Republican if I thought their policies were better. The label does not interest me. It's what actually happens.
Labels are important, though, because we know what a Republican is. We know what a Democrat is. Some of us know
And
what a
yet,
Green
what a Republican is and what a Democrat is has changed dramatically throughout history and will continue to change. And we can fight for that change and make sure it changes in the right direction.
hasn't been, though, for the last 30 years. And
Yes.
we have this really big problem of consultant-centered campaigns. I don't know if you've heard that term before, but since about the 70s,
Yep.
there's just gobs of money flowing in.
Money in politics is the biggest problem in the country today. I 100% agree. I don't think there's a bigger issue, period, because we can't affect change on any other issue until we address that, which is why we need to back somebody who can win in order to change that system and get money out of politics. If Bernie gets in and if he's successful in changing the country enough to where in the midterms we get a progressive Congress, then we can get money out of politics. We can have public financing. This country would be so much a different country if we had ranked choice voting and every American citizen got a voucher for $100 that they could donate to any candidate, use it or lose it. That's how a lot of public financing works. And that's the only money that's allowed to be spent toward political issues in advertising. I mean, this would be a
A
totally
lot
different
about
country.
voting, but that that's a green policy, right?
Sure. Green policies are great. I don't have a policy disagreement with you. That's not the issue.
Why
Are you
wouldn't you
trying to say that other parties shouldn't steal your policies? Like, if it's a good policy, we should all support it.
Well, the problem is when they steal it, they water it down. So the
Sometimes.
Green New Deal that the Democrats put forth is not the Green New Deal that the Green Party put forth. It has no mention of taking money away from the military, which is absolutely necessary to save the planet from the mass extinctions that we're already starting to experience. So they are a bit different. Any ranked choice voting would probably leave out the fact that there are a ton of other restrictions to getting on the ballot that are pretty much mostly supported by the Democratic Party. Since the 2000 election, the Democrats have put forth a ton of restrictions that mostly impact the Green Party on getting on the
Certainly.
ballot.
The establishment Democrats are the fake resistance. They are there to serve oligarchs. The Republicans just straight up serve oligarchs. The Democrats are the fake resistance. Like, I'm right there with you. That's why all but 48 or whatever it was of the Democrats voted for Trump's defense bill.
Do you know what happens every 10 years?
That doesn't mean we can't change it, because it has changed in the past. The Southern strategy is an example of a party changing. These things happen every once in a while. And right now we're in the middle of a shift. The fact that somebody as progressive as Bernie has a chance to win is amazing. And that's evidence that the change is happening. So why wouldn't you want to jump on board with the side that has the best chance of winning?
Let's be honest. Bernie is basically a centrist if we were not, if like fascism weren't conservative right now.
He is by far the best candidate that has a chance to win. So again, this goes back to my heuristic on critical thinking. We have to compare people. You know, I've talked to some people who want to criticize certain votes Bernie's made, and I'm not even willing to discuss the specifics unless you're comparing it to somebody who's better that has a chance to win. Because if there's not somebody who's better who has a chance to win, then any criticism is irrelevant. He's still the best.
I think you and I
don't know
have
if you
a
guys can hear my dogs howling, but my dogs are howling.
A bit. I think you and I have a disagreement on what it means to have a chance to win. Often these things are self-perpetuating. For example, the media perpetuates this kind of stuff by saying that so-and-so is good in the polls and has a chance and is electable. So then the people do what the media tells them, basically, by voting for Biden. Or voting for whoever is who they say is the front runner. And I'm not sure that this would be any different with Bernie, because it isn't right now. Despite the fact that he leads in a lot of polls, the media has not put him on top. They have explicitly said that all these other people are doing well in the polls, and then don't mention anything about Bernie Sanders until all the way at the end of the article when everybody's tuned out already.
Right. Well, the issue is that you have general opposition, obviously, against progressives that will always be there from the establishment, from the status quo, from them, and they're going to do everything they can. But optics matter. The strength of arguments matter. Everything they throw against Bernie has no weight behind it. I think it helps him in the same way that all the attacks against Trump helped Trump, because most of the arguments against him that the media was throwing were just he's so rude. They were really weak. And so it tended to help Trump more because of how bad the arguments were. But if they have an actual good argument that they can repeat constantly, that you can't really respond to in a realistic way, then you will never defeat that. And that's the problem with the third party, is they have valid arguments because it is a two-party system. It's just not going to happen. And when that's repeated ad nauseum, which you and I both know will be, if the Green Party was starting to be relevant, then everybody's, Democratic and establishment and mainstream media alike, is going to be throwing this fact out there that if you're a Democrat who votes for the Green Party, you're going to help Trump win, because that's just how it works. So when they have a valid argument against you, that's when you can't win. Bernie's had these arguments thrown against him constantly, but they're crap arguments. We can handle those. We can respond to those. People ask him how he's going to pay for Medicare for all, and he laughs at him and asks how we're paying for it now. Medicare for all costs less. Why are you asking me how much it costs? All these kind of criticisms are easy to handle. But a third party, that's not easy to handle, and it won't be.
Of course, there's a lot of talking points that aren't easy to handle, especially when the media has been such a powerful force against us for so long. But that doesn't mean that people can't smell, like, kind of the truth coming out. You know what I mean? People realize, if you give them 5 minutes, that Jill Stein didn't spoil any election. One, she never got even a single electoral vote. You can't spoil something if you don't have any electoral votes, right? So right. You tell me that
that's
the Greens
point.
Never spoiled anything.
I didn't say they have spoiled it. I'm saying they would spoil it if they were relevant, which they're not. 1% of the vote and 0 electoral votes didn't spoil anything. You're 100% right. Al Gamer, vote for Bernie in the primary so you don't have to vote for Trump or some establishment Democrat in the general. The primary is more important than the general.
Well, there's actually quite a few races this year. Please vote for all of those things. Yes. You probably have your primary for your local votes around February sometime, and you can look this up on your local election commission website. You might even have like My Vote California or My Vote Wisconsin. That gives you more details. So there's the February election. There's usually an April election. That's the general for your locality. In my state, the general election is also the presidential primary, which is incredibly confusing.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely search. Like, Google's really good at this. If you search Google, it's going to guide you to resources that tell you what you need. Definitely check out and vote in every election, because they all matter. And the local candidates are hugely important. And if there's a Green Party person running for mayor, and there's any chance of them winning, absolutely vote for them. They're great candidates. There's progressives in primaries. There's ballot issues that are important. Nothing affects our lives more than politics, so it's wild to me that people don't follow it more. But definitely get out there and vote. So I think...
Steve, why do you got to use the qualifier?
Can we agree on this? Like,
chance of winning.
If you and I both care about changing the world and actually putting policies into effect, why can't we just focus on fighting for those policies? Why can't the Green Party vote in the Democratic primary, because that's advancing those issues they care about, and then vote for their party nominee in the general if the progressive person doesn't win?
Wouldn't have a party that way. Having a Green Party means that we have to be active all year round, every year.
I'm not saying don't be active. But why can't you just vote in the Democratic primary? And
between Dario Hunter and Ray Hawkins. So we have to decide between those two candidates ourselves, who would be the strongest presidential candidate. Many of us don't have primaries in our states because we were not allowed on the ballot. Certain states need like percentage of the population to vote in order to have a primary, which is also not very democratic. in those cases,
The
if you
system's not
want to be a
democratic.
Green, you have to go to the Green conventions and vote there for your primary.
Well, as the Supreme Court, I think it was a Supreme Court case, proved, when we were suing the Democratic Party for screwing Bernie, they ruled that the parties are a private organization that the government doesn't get to tell what to do. So the Green Party could change their structure such that it's an internal process to where how they pick their nominees, but you can still register Democrat and vote in the Democratic primary.
Why would we do that?
Because that's the best chance for change. Like, this is the whole argument we've made here. This is a two-party system, whether we like it or not, and I don't like it. And our best chance to change it, like, if you actually care about the Green Party, your best chance to make the Green Party relevant is to change the system so it's not a two-party system. And your best chance to do that is by backing Bernie Sanders right now, because he opposes the two-party system.
Bernie Sanders does not care for the Green Party. He doesn't talk about us. He doesn't say.
Well, of course not, because if he did, he would never win Democrats. But we know he rejects the two-party system.
Give credit where credit is due. He could say, and I got this policy from the Green Party. As you can see, it says Green New Deal right on it.
Any
that's
support
not
he gave the Green Party would kill his relevance, and you and I both know that.
Party.
He's already loses a huge amount of the liberals because they say he's not a Democrat, and he's been independent this whole time, and that already hurts him. If he supported the Green Party in any way, it would kill his relevance, and that would just cost us influence on making the changes we want in the world. But he's definitely said he rejects the two-party system. He's supported ranked choice voting in the alternative vote. If he's the president, and if we have a left wave that affects Congress that follows it, that's our best chance at changing the system so that the Green Party can be relevant. Because if we had ranked choice voting, the Green Party could be relevant. All of a sudden, we wouldn't be able to say that you're spoiling elections. You would have a caucus in Congress. Can you imagine that? If you have a caucus of even just 30 seats, and by the way, I didn't talk more about the Tea Party change, but this is how it happened. It started with basically no politicians, and then they got a handful, and then they had 30, I don't remember the exact number, but say 30 people in Congress. But the number was enough to where the Republican Party at that time had a majority in Congress with the Tea Party, but they didn't have a majority without the Tea Party. And that gave them tremendous power, even though they were a small group. They could say that, well, we're not going to vote with you unless you put our amendments on there, etc. So that gave them tremendous power. It kind of makes them kingmakers. That's a role the Green Party could have in a ranked choice system. They could have 20, 30 candidates in there, and that they could be relevant. They could be important. They could force some amendments and changes into the system. And I would love that. But it can only happen if we change the system.
We wouldn't even be talking about ranked choice voting right now if the Green Party hasn't been doing what it's been doing for the last 20 years. Do you realize that?
I said at the very beginning, one of the first things I said is that they've done great things in terms of putting policies out there and spreading rhetoric and trying to affect the Overton window. They're doing great things for the left in those kind of terms. But that they're not winning national elections, and they won't.
In order for us to support Democrats, we cannot be a party ourselves. The whole point of having another party would get trampled over by the Democratic Party. You can't be part of the Democratic Party and also be part of the Green Party. And that's not just a policy principle or anything like that. That's just the way it is.
Okay.
In the system. So if you want us to vote for Bernie, you're telling us to give up our party and screw the last 20 years of work, just join the Democrats. And that is
considering they're never going to become more relevant unless we change the system. And our best chance of changing the system is Bernie Sanders.
Kind of going in a circle here. you say that our best chance on changing the system is to vote for Democrats, as we've been doing for the last 50 years. And I've been saying, let's do something different.
Well, you haven't addressed the actual substantive points here, though. I mean, people have been voting for the Green Party since 2001 and since other similar parties for all of America's history, and they don't change anything either. So that argument you're using
That's not
against
quite
voting
right.
Democrats affects you way more because progressives have won in the Democratic Party. They haven't
That's
won
not
on a
quite
national
right.
level with the Green Party.
The reason that we didn't have a revolution in the early 1900s is because the Socialist Party and the Democratic Party made a deal to get the New Deal passed. Um, and there may have to be a similar coalition happen with a if there were a Bernie Sanders administration to get the Green New Deal passed. But we are talking about a candidate who last time did not get the nomination, and this time, if he gets the nomination, that would be great. But if not, putting all our eggs in that basket would ruin us. We would
Well,
have no
that's the
candidate in the
point of my
general election.
argument.
We
All
would
our
have
eggs
no voice in the
are
overturn
in that
at
basket.
all.
Our eggs are in that basket, whether we like it or not. And we're very close to
I'm
being
not
able to
putting my
win
eggs
with
in
it.
that
Like,
basket,
that's the
dude.
thing. If you're in the Green Party, it's got to be depressing to not be relevant. To look at the numbers and see that you got 0 electoral votes, it's got to be depressing. Like, why not back somebody who actually has a real chance to win everything? Like, why would you not support that? I
Because
still.
I don't believe that he has the chance that you believe he does. And if you're wrong, then the entire progressive movement is screwed, not only for this year, but for the next 4. With my move in
We're
continuing
still
a
screwed because the Green
real
Party's
progressive
not going to
party,
win 50 times more votes than they did last time.
excuse me, party continues on as it's been doing and pushing its policies, we not only get them out into the general public, we not only get to hear about the Green New Deal and about ranked choice voting and all these things, we get more people on board.
Hallelujah. Okay,
And
so there have not been very many polls recently. I did not know what would happen when I pulled this up. Check this out. As of yesterday, Iowa Democratic Presidential Caucus, Sanders tied for first. In the New Hampshire Democratic Presidential Primary, Sanders is winning it. He's winning California,
that doesn't
and
matter when
he's
you're a super
very close
delegate.
to winning New Hampshire or Nevada. If he wins the first 3 states, they have to talk about him, and that gives him a massive surge nationally.
Do they have to talk about him?
Well, yeah, because it's newsworthy to discuss primaries. Like, you can't not as a
Well,
news agency.
it's newsworthy that he's been getting the most donations and that he's been
And he's
first in the
gotten headlines for that,
it's
and it's
very
helped him, and it's probably why his poll numbers rose.
For the most part, that stuff has been buried though.
Yeah, but he's leading in the first 3 states and in California, which is now an early state and has the most delegates of any state. So we have this where he's actually leading versus the Green Party, which got 1% last time. Like, I don't see any logical argument here if you actually care about changes in the world and not just, party identity.
It's not just about party identity. Not only are we a party during the times that there are elections, which is very few times per year, we are a party during all of these walkouts for climate change. We are a party during all these other sorts of movement activities as well. And we're always on the front lines. A lot of the people who were walking out, marching on Saturday against the war in Iran, that was all run by Green Party leaders.
Right. And
so,
like I said, there's great people on the Green Party. They do good stuff. But we
they're
need to
just
win this
saying we're a
election, and we
talking
have a
party.
chance now. If that 1% of the population that voted for Jill Stein backed Bernie in the primary, he would win because not very many people vote in the primary. It doesn't take very many people to move a primary. So
if you're just doing the spoiler myth arguments
Well,
that
it's not a myth. It's a
Nader
math.
was the reason that that Gore lost and all that
Well,
stuff.
he isn't. I did not make that claim. I'm not
No, you
saying that they
didn't. But
have.
you're
I
using
don't.
that
Not saying they have spoiled anything. I am saying that if they were relevant, then they would be. I mean, if they won 30% of the vote, are you going to tell me an equal number of 30% would be coming from the Republican Party than the Democratic Party? Like, of course they're going to take more from the Democrats. Now, if it's 1 or 2 or 3%, then it's mostly protest votes in like non-swing states, and it's not really
you
spoiling
mean
anything.
take more from the Democrats.
And then the Democrats would lose, and then we would have 4 more years of Trump. Like, there's
You
no
realize that
path
only about
to
half of
victory for the
Americans
left with
have
the Green
even been
Party.
voting at all, right?
What's that?
You realize that only about half of eligible voters have been voting at all, right?
Right. And how long has the Green Party been running?
About 20 years, but
You think
to
all
our
of a
credit,
sudden the non-voting 50% are going to vote Green? Like, what evidence do you have to support this? I have evidence for what I'm saying here.
what evidence do you have that everything's going to be different in the Democratic Party, which has not changed its tune in 50 years?
It's on the screen. My evidence is on the screen.
That doesn't matter, though. That one poll, in 50 years of the Democratic Party and people trying to change it from the inside, people make a little bit of progress, and then things like the census happen, and all of that disappears because the establishment Democrats get to decide on a lot of those new gerrymandering lines.
Yep.
And
it
they
was
will often
establishment Democrats that created a superdelegate system to where nobody had a chance because the superdelegates could all jump in advance. And then the progressives have been surging and they've made real change. Now we don't have superdelegates until the second round. That's huge. Now we have a chance. Now they can't cover politics without having to admit that Sanders is leading in Iowa and New Hampshire, the first 2 states. You have no chance of getting that kind of coverage with the Green Party. So why not back somebody who can win? Like, this is the evidence. Like, and it's not just one poll. Like, this is a trend line. He's had stronger support than anybody.
We've got Sanders at 23 for Iowa, Buttigieg at 23, Biden at 23, Warren at 16.
Look how close that is. That's what I mean. If you and your Green Party supporters bust to Iowa and canvass in Iowa, when it's that close, that's when you have power. Because a little bit of influence can change it. That's what I mean. That's why we need you. A little bit of influence can make all the difference in the world when it's that tight.
You're telling me if my party was influential, we would be a spoiler, but you don't think that having several candidates in this race, all about the same poll numbers, you don't think that there's any spoiling capacity there? Where does your math come in when
we're talking
Sanders,
about within
Biden,
the same
and
party.
Warren
It's not the same argument. I'm sorry.
is exactly the same argument?
Well, who's spoiling it? I mean, I would be glad to say that Booker and Yang and Gabbard should all drop out and endorse Sanders, but they don't want to, so they're not.
What about Warren as a
Warren
spoiler?
should too. Absolutely.
Warren
And
is
maybe she
absolutely
will.
not dropping out. She is about the green military. She is backed by some very powerful military interests.
I agree. She's the most. If she wins, she would be the best president we've had in modern history, and that is not saying very much because she would not be that great.
Exactly. So she could very clearly be a spoiler for Sanders. If you truly believe that relevant people can spoil other relevant people.
But we're talking about voters here. I'm not saying you should go run in the primary because it's a little late for that. But if you and a bus full of people go to Iowa, find a district that's contested, and help just 10 more people vote for Sanders. He can win by that much. Obviously, it's pretty tight. When things are tight, that's when you have the most political influence. A little bit of support right now that pushes him over the top to where he wins Iowa, even if he wins it by freaking one vote, he wins it. And if he wins it, they have to cover that. They can't be like, yeah, and they voted in the Iowa primary today, and we're not going to say who won. Let's go to the next topic. They can't do that and still consider themselves news. They have to cover it. And he's also winning New Hampshire, and he's also winning Nevada, so they have to cover those. And then he has a chance to win everything.
I'd be very surprised at how the news has gotten away with so little coverage of things that are relevant. I mean, it's kind of the same deal with a lot of our movements on the ground.
Oh, come on. You're not going to tell me you think they're not going to cover who wins the state of Iowa.
They might, but they're not going to cover it in a good light.
It's a capitalist news. They care about profit. If they don't cover it, people will be looking to see who won, and they'll go to a different source. They will cover who wins Nevada, or all the states. They have to. It's news. They're in competition. There's a profit motive here. People want to know. As long as people want to know something, they will have to show them.
And what is from keeping them from, instead of doing a whole, 30 minutes on it or something like that, clipping to whatever's happening with Trump? And Trump becomes the biggest headline.
It doesn't matter because they still cover it. And people who care will look at that and they'll go, oh, wow, Bernie won. Whether it's 3 hours of positive coverage, 3 hours of negative coverage, or a 10-second segment, either way, people find out Bernie won and they go, oh, wow, Bernie won. Well, damn, maybe we have a chance.
There were quite a few studies in 2016 of the coverage between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, and how much more coverage that Trump got, $3 basically worth of his name across all of the networks. And what's to keep that from happening if Bernie is doing well in the primary, but these news networks don't want people to know as much about him?
It has been happening,
they just cut
but he's
to,
still leading. That's the thing. Everybody in the establishment hates Bernie. We all know this. And yet he's still winning.
Great.
Like, he has his own network. He has his own channel on YouTube. He has his own Twitter. He has his own ways to reach to people, and it's working. So I'm not planning on support from the establishment because we ain't going to get it. You and I both know that. But there's no denying that he has a real chance here, and a little bit of support can make all the difference when things are tight like this.
Well, that just can't come from people from the Green Party. It is kind of. There are quite a few Greens that put their Bernie hats on and go vote for Bernie. But
so I guess it can come from the Green Party.
Then that they have a party that they need to support.
Why?
And I think that Bernie people ought to start supporting Greens. That they should have been supporting Greens in 2016.
Why should we quit when we're this close to winning everything? We should quit and join the party that has never had any chance. Like, why should we do that? Just because you like the Green Party? We need to win. We need to win in order to change anything.
Well, when Obama won in 2008, people were championing him as very progressive. They thought he was going to change everything.
You can't compare Bernie Sanders to Barack Obama. You and I both know that. He was a wolf in sheep's clothing. He was a neoliberal establishment type. He's a neoliberal establishment type who took big money, and he might have pretended to be progressive, but he wasn't. We both know Bernie Sanders is not pretending to be progressive. He has too long a record of fighting for the people. His funding is entirely from the people. This is not Barack Obama. This is Bernie frickin' Sanders.
I know that, but I'm talking about their Democratic win. Vote blue no matter who mentality. to say there should be no other parties in the race. If you vote for any other party, you're denying any progressive efforts in the Democratic Party. And there's always another progressive Democrat. And people did look at Obama as a progressive, and people did look at
And they were wrong, but they're not wrong when we look at Bernie Sanders. So that's irrelevant.
is relevant because people are easily fooled that they think of Warren.
Do you think Bernie Sanders is fooling anybody?
People love Warren. They think of her as the female.
If Sanders wins the first 3 states, what do you think is going to happen to Warren? I think a lot of her supporters are going to go to Sanders.
You keep saying if Sanders wins the first 3 states. Well, we don't know how Sanders is going to do yet. And I'm saying that we need to have a plan for a long-term political strategy, not one that's based on a single person who's, he's getting up there in age. He's not going to be around forever, not as a presidential candidate, and not in the Senate. And so we cannot put all our eggs in that basket and just say, well, and throw up our hands and say, oh, well, we've been trying to have a progressive party for the last 20 years, but now it doesn't matter because we have this one guy who might possibly win the Democratic nominee. It seems crazy to me.
Well, I don't know why it would seem crazy when there's a chance to make real change in the world on the one side and no chance on the other side.
To make real change in the world if a lot of people started voting green. If those Bernie folks were like, screw the Democratic Party, let's go to the party that's closest in value to us. That would be the Green Party, easily. As you said yourself, that you would vote green from California if Bernie wasn't in the race in the general.
Because I'm not in a swing state. There is no denying that any of the candidates is better than Trump.
Vote their conscience.
Systemic changes matter. Like as bad as Obama was and other neoliberals are, and as bad as Biden is, who's worse than Obama, he's just horrible. He's a Republican light. But as bad as they are, they're not going to be fighting to make systemic changes that make it so we can't freaking vote. And that's what the GOP is doing. They're fighting voting rights all over the country. And if they win in 2020, we're not going to have elections will continue to get less and less fair. It'll make it harder and harder to ever make a change. The systemic changes matter. And that's why we need to win. And that's why we can't risk it. This is just, I'm sorry, it's math.
I'm just not sure what you're talking about because it's already unfair. It's already not very democratic. And the Democrats have been just as complicit in those things as the Republicans. While the Republicans deny people the right to vote, the Democrats deny people the right to run for office. While the Republicans deny some rights, they're both gerrymandering too. If you've ever been to Illinois, you know the mob runs it.
Well, I wish the Democrat Party gerrymandered more because it's the only way to change shit. What we should be doing is we should be doing everything the GOP does that's fair or not fair. And by doing that, you can force them to negotiate. You go, oh, you're going to gerrymander Texas so the Democrats don't get to say there. Cool, we're going to do it over here unless you want to put in a fair system. And if we did that, we could force them to put in a fair system for everybody but we don't. Like we gerrymander, sure, but it's not nearly as effective as the GOP's gerrymandering.
That's a really bad take. First of all, it is just as effective no matter which party does it. Second of all, to say that we ought to be doing
war gets dirty. We have to win.
Democratic is really not a great way to have a democracy.
Yeah, but if the GOP fights dirty and pulls no punches and does absolutely everything they can fucking get it away with, and they push the line, and even if the Supreme Court strikes them down, they like go just a little bit closer to the line, which is what they do. And the Democrats are like, no, we're going to be democratic, pure rights snowflakes, and we're going to fight clean, and if we lose, then we lose. We become a fascist state. That's the natural consequence of that behavior. That's why I say it matters. because there's more at stake here. We have the future of the freaking planet at stake here.
So you're talking about fighting dirty to deny people rights versus my
If I have to fight
expand.
dirty to deny fascists a vote, I'm sorry. Yes, the planet matters more. Now, what would happen if we did this? We would be able to force them to. They would be like, well, we can't win because you're gerrymandering all over the place. So then we can force them to the table and we can make them pass a constitutional amendment or something of that nature that makes it so you can't gerrymander. There's a lot of solutions in place to gerrymandering. We could put those in place, but it will never happen if we don't force them to, is my only point.
I'm
You
very
can disagree with that or not.
anti-authoritarian.
I'm massively against gerrymandering. That's why I'll do anything it takes to stop it.
The reason that Bernie Sanders is such an appealing candidate is because he is not playing dirty. He
I'm
is
talking about
legitimately
systemic
getting his
metaphorical
donations.
fighting dirty, not calling people names and stuff. So I think Bernie Sanders is
What
a
I
genius
mean is by
politician.
that he's not using the millions and millions of dollars from corporations. He is doing what most Democrats. It is fighting fair with your actual constituent support rather than fighting dirty, as both parties have been doing. Very undemocratic.
Right. No, we're mixing our metaphors here. I don't disagree with you on that. The gerrymandering is a red herring. I probably shouldn't have brought up, but that's my take on it. It's different. When you take corporate money, you're indebting yourself to them. That's a little different. You can't. People who take corporate money can't be trusted to eliminate corporate money.
Absolutely, and people who are willing to gerrymander other people out of a vote, just as much, are not really doing a good job for democracy. And we ought to make sure that our leaders are not playing with the same dirty tricks that the other side is, basically just to be more authoritarian from a different angle.
Well, I think it's different because, again, we need to win. We have no chance of doing anything on climate change if we don't win. We have no chance of stopping fascism if we don't win. It doesn't matter because none of the Democratic Party is doing what I'm saying here anyway. This is something Cenk Uygur said before, that we should gerrymander in such a way, we publicly say, hey, we're going to do this because the Republican Party is doing it, but we don't want to do this, and here's our policy to eliminate gerrymandering. If you don't like what we're doing, please sign it, GOP. And if you did that, I think that's an effective rhetorical and pragmatic strategy. But anyway.
Well, you're also talking about how we can't do anything against climate change without winning the presidency. And I don't think that that's a very good narrative to push either, because a lot of people, if they don't get their candidate, then will just duck out of politics for good and, prep for the oncoming future of a fiery hellscape. And that's very unhopeful. I can't endorse that kind of sentiment. Maybe because I'm just a younger person and I don't want to see a fiery hellscape in my future. But I saw that basically all of France walked out and just refused to participate in society until the government, a very neoliberal government, said did what the people wanted.
Yep.
So,
and what caused
I would
that?
much rather have Trump win again than have Biden win. For sure, 100%. Because if people are not willing to do the work on the streets that they need to do to make us move forward, whether or not the government has moved forward, that's
so what
setting
can
us
we
up
do
for
without
failure.
the government when it comes to climate change? Like, I don't know what you're advocating for here.
Oh, I'm really big on diversity of tactics. So I deal with the political realm with the Green Party. I get candidates on the ballot. Many of them win. At the presidential and state levels, we've had a little bit more difficulty, particularly because of the money in those races and the unwillingness of even progressives like yourself wanting to put even the slightest bit of effort in possibly doing third party action.
Well, no,
But we're working.
I'm talking about climate change here. So, what can we do to stop climate change if we don't win national elections?
Well, Greens have been on the front lines with that too. For example, a lot of Greens were at the Dakota Access Pipeline protesting for a very long time.
The one that's in action currently?
Yeah, the one that Obama could not put into action until it was under the radar again.
It's still going.
But I think that we need a lot more action, no matter what it is. A lot of people are just almost fed up, but we need people to be really
talking
fed
about
up.
Climate change here, and this is what I mean. Like, we cannot change climate change without having massive action and a massive amount of people involved, and without basically government action. I don't know. I thought it sounded like you were advocating for like neoliberal type stuff, which is like you as an individual should lower your carbon footprint, and you should, lower your thermostat a couple degrees, and you should ride a bike to work if you can. And like this neoliberal stuff that's basically turning it around and blaming it on us, the individuals. And the fact is, what's that?
I don't agree with those positions at all.
Okay, good. Because obviously most people are not privileged enough to be able to make those kind of changes. Like there's like 5% of the population that's privileged enough and cares enough to do that. So we're never going to make changes that way. Climate change is a big enough problem. It has to happen at a global level. Like the US has to lead from the federal level and lead action globally in order to do anything about climate change. There's no other way we possibly have a chance. So I know I'm right there with you that I wish all our eggs weren't in one basket. I just think they are. I think that's just the reality we live in right now. And we need Bernie to win. Now, if he loses, then we'll have to make plan B. But right now, he's it. I wanted to try to bring Solitary down. He's been patient here. I was going to talk to him when we were done. And I don't know if I'm going to hang up on you when I try to call him. So why don't I give you an opportunity to just make some closing statements here if you want to advertise your Twitter or any other platforms you have. And then I'll try to bring him on. And if you like, you can stick around for a few minutes and talk to the both of us. Or you can bow. So leave it up to you.
Yeah, sure. I'll stay tuned for a little bit. I don't have a whole lot of social media presence. I'm Eagle Winged Turtle on my Twitter, but I'm very new to Twitter and don't use it a whole lot.
Good. I wouldn't recommend it. Twitter's very toxic as hell.
Yeah. I am very interested in media, but a lot of online time kind of hurts my soul a little bit. But if you or anybody that you know would like to get involved with the Green Party or the Green movement in general, a great way to start is just to contact your local Greens. And if you don't have local Greens, every state has a state Green Party that you can reach out to. And we're doing stuff all the time. I have several candidates that I'm running right now as we speak for local election. And I'm actually thinking about running myself, but we will see.
Awesome. Well, I wish you the best of luck. And like I've been consistent on, there's a lot of good stuff the Greens do. I'm not trying to discourage anyone from that. Their local elections, very important. A lot of advocacy. Definitely green. It looks like it's gp.org is their website. So I'm sure you can figure out what you have locally and whatnot from the main website. But again, I think right now there's nothing more important than helping Bernie Sanders win. So you can do a lot for the Green Party and still help Bernie. Would be my
You
point.
can find me in July at the Democratic National Convention.
Well, I've already publicly said that if he wins the most delegates, but not over 51%, then I'm going to be at the convention and I will get arrested if necessary to try to prevent. Like I think I'll be there barricading the freaking entrance until they make Bernie the freaking nominee or I get arrested. Let's just say that. There's nothing more important. If enough people show up and insist that they honor the will of the people, they won't have a choice. If there's 500,000 people there, then we can make it happen. All right, let me try a call Swole here. I haven't tried to have a call with more than one person. So.
Am I in?
Hey, you're in. How you doing?
Hey, I'm in. I'm doing good.
Hey, welcome. Thanks
Doing
for coming
well.
on.
You're glad to be here.
Now, it looks like I did lose Eagle Wing Turtle. Let me see if I can figure this out because I would like to know how to do these group calls that are so cool. Do you know how to do that?
I've been in many.
I know, right? It can't be that hard. Come on now.
I don't know. I think you can just add people. Yeah, you can just add people. Add friends to DM, maybe. I think there's like an add button at near the top of the call.
Ah, there you go. You're right. You're right. I think that's it. Yay! You're back. All right. How you doing?
Yeah. Okay. Are we all in?
It
Hello?
looks like it. Hello.
Yeah, we're in.
Yes, we did it. Yes.
Who are we? Who are we? Eagle Wing Turtle. Who's this?
Yeah.
So
I'm
Eagle,
at Vosh's chat.
Oh, okay. Well, before Eagle leaves, I just want to mention that up here in Canada, I have worked for the Green Party here on a couple of elections. I worked for a candidate in my local riding for a provincial election, and I voted Green for the federal election that just happened, and that was because the Greens had the best platform. I normally vote with our Social Democratic Party, the NDP, but their plan was weaker. It wasn't as good. And the Green Party in Canada is stronger. I think they got like 10% of the vote or 15 or something.
I'm actually going to bow out real quick. I'll be right back, but I'll be listening. So keep up introducing yourself.
Okay. Oh yeah, everybody. I'm the Swolitariat. I have a YouTube channel. I met Re-Vera on Theory Plebes various streams when he was twitching. But yeah, that's me. That's my situation. Eagle, you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. Yeah, because the whole Green Party situation is, I think, very different in the United States. I know, like, I could tell you right now that having worked for the Green Party in Canada, which I like, I know that if I were in the United States with a Bernie running, I would be supporting Bernie. In any other election, I might in fact be on. I'd probably be helping the Greens. That's just the way I do the calculation in my head.
Yeah, a lot of people feel that way, that there's kind of Bernie or bust.
I might have voted Clinton just to keep Trump out that last time, to be honest. But it's tough. Nader, I mean, definitely Nader was worth helping.
Why would you have voted for Hillary Clinton?
To keep Trump out.
Yeah, but why do you think she's better than Trump?
Oh, almost every way, except maybe Warhawk wise. She may have been more. I mean, I don't. she wouldn't have got out of the Iran deal. So in fact, in that area, she would have been better with Iran. She I don't know what else she would have done more aggressive. I mean, Libya and Syria are kind of. I doubt she would have gotten any deeper with those. She wouldn't have started a trade war, and she wouldn't. Most importantly, she wouldn't have did the tax cut, and the children in camps wouldn't be happening, or if it was, be a much smaller extent than it is now.
I'm back. Sorry, had to leave.
Yeah.
Well, I think that you're right about a lot of those things. I'm not sure that having a smaller version of children in camps is a better thing than a bigger version of children in camps. I think that since it has sunlight now, that it's really hard for that to continue much longer. So hopefully,
you'd think so,
and yet it is.
Hopefully, the fact that Trump is like this is just such an abhorrent situation, and that we can see.
Let me talk about this for a minute, because this is a common what do you call it? The theory of thought that accelerationist, basically the accelerationist, that if things get worse, then they'll get better. That doesn't always happen. We can look at the history of pre-World War II Germany, for instance. Things do not necessarily get better. And the fact that Trump has been getting progressively worse, and yet his base has only gotten solider. I talk to conservatives all the times, and they defend him no matter what. Kids in cages, kids torn away from their parents, starting World War III. They don't give a fuck. They support him no matter what.
I know.
Him being in the bully pulpit and appealing to this Trump cult and having constant rallies is like, it gets stronger the more it's allowed to continue. It's not giving us a chance to take it down. If we don't defeat Trump in 2020, he's going. I honestly think we're going to become a fascist state. I think it's going to be a one-party system, and I don't think we have another fair election after that, to be perfectly honest.
I'm not sure that Trump is as strong of a candidate as we think that he is, because through his trade wars, he has left behind a lot of his voters in the Midwest.
Right. That's an establishment talking point. Yes, I mean, you can always find a few anecdotes, but statistically speaking, his support has stayed around 40% no matter what.
But where it matters,
how much
is the
of the vote do you need to win when 50% don't vote? You only need 25%. So you only
need like, what was it, 80,000, 70,000 votes in the Midwest to win?
Yep.
Well, we've kind of shown that people win because they get more people out to vote. So if Trump fails to get his base out to vote, he may not be as strong as the media has kind of presented him.
Yeah.
Either way, like, he's a really crappy president. I'm not saying that he's not. I don't think that Hillary Clinton was any less crappy, though, as a potential president. She wouldn't have done the same things that Trump has, but she was egging on a hot war with Russia at the time. So that would have been a huge deal. She has been just as bad on so many of these issues, like a continuance of Barack Obama, who was the deporter-in-chief. Even Trump can't keep up with his numbers.
How was she on voting rights?
She was probably, the establishment Democrat. I'm not sure exactly her votes on the matter, but as an establishment Democrat, I would assume that
one party is trying to attack democracy in America so that we never get a voice in our government again, and the other party isn't. Like, even if everything else was equal, that's enough for me right there.
It's not true, though, because the Democrats have curtailed the rights to run for office over and over again.
That might be true, and that doesn't have a whole lot to... It has some to do with it, but they want to protect the status quo. They want to protect the two-party system. They're not going to support a move to a fascist one-party system.
Yeah, and the Democrats need the black vote in order to win elections, and that's like so the Democrats at the end of the day are never going to hurt the voting rights that much. Um,
Yeah, they're going to gerrymander and try to keep weaker third parties out because they don't want to have the distraction and blah blah blah. But in terms of keeping people from voting, it's not going to happen.
yeah, they're undemocratic in other ways,
And
but
when
they'll
it comes
keep
to
the voting
foreign
rights.
policy, Hillary versus Trump, I would agree that in terms of lives, they're probably about equal. The only difference is Trump does things stupidly, and Hillary would at least be a
Recklessly.
smarter war hawk. So
Yeah,
there's
right.
that.
A more stable war hawk.
It's
I
in
think
terms of lives lost, it's about the same, but she's less likely to like start hot nuclear war or some shit.
I've got to admit, though, that we've seen a very particular trend over the past 30 years or so with these neoliberals that whenever a Republican gets into office, they run to the right. And then when the Democrats are in office, even if they have a Democratic led Congress, that they hold the line. They don't move it back to the left. They've been
Yep.
holding the line.
To be fair, Hillary in the '90s tried universal health care and got shit on by the media and by Republicans. So I mean, the Clintons started out to the left of where they ended up, but they
I think it's
didn't
important to
work
never
out.
forget, how people work. And this is important because we're all shaped by our environment. So you could make a good argument that Hillary used to be more progressive, but when you become the first lady and spend decades at fancy dinners with donors and
Yeah,
oligarchs and people who've been in Washington D.C. for decades and are the power structure there, it's pretty hard to do that without big influence. This is why, like, let's say Yang was actually a progressive. He's not. Some people think he is. He's basically a left-leaning libertarian. But if he was, I wouldn't trust him because he hasn't been there. We don't know how he's going to act. The reason we trust Bernie is because he's been there for decades and he's been the rock weathering the storm.
same with Corbyn. Corbyn's background is all, you know, wearing those labor hats and and going to and walking on picket lines.
Yep. Bernie doesn't I don't know how he spends all his time, but I know he walks to work and spends a lot of time on picket lines. So he surrounds himself with real people.
Yeah, that's a big difference.
That's really
So
good stuff, but I just can't wait another 4 years to continue Green Party work. You know what I mean? Because
well, catch up
that's
with
a
me after
long.
the nomination, and we can talk again. So, out of curiosity, what happens if Bernie Sanders does win the nomination?
I would love to see that debate, to see a Howie Hawkins or a Dario Hunter versus Bernie Sanders versus Donald Trump. That would be a very different conversation than we have seen in the past.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
true.
in the entire history of our presidential debates.
It's going to be a
Anyway,
different debate than we've ever seen before with just Bernie and Trump. But absolutely. So, but what happens if Bernie's the nominee? Would you vote for him in a
I
general?
would probably vote for the Green Party person.
Still,
I'm going
huh?
to show my cards a little bit. I am a Green, like I'm in office as a Green. I'm in the party structure. So for me to vote in a different party when I help to run this party would be incredibly awful to do.
Hold on, Eagle. One question then. They're not all Greens are alike. What if your nominee ends up being on the more neoliberal side of Green? Because I mean, we get that in Canada. We've had more and less kind of socialist members and more neoliberal candidates as well.
No, I really can't imagine that happening. Our Green Party is to the left of a lot of the other Green parties around the world. In fact, when we come to the International Green Conference, we're often trying to pull the entire world Greens to the left.
Yeah, from
Okay.
what little I know, I'd have to agree with that. I don't think it's very likely a chance. Like I don't. It's hard to make an argument that they're going to be much more progressive than Bernie because Bernie's about as progressive as I think you can be and have a chance to win in this country. There's
At
not
this
very many of his policies that I'm like, yeah, he should be better on that. Like, look at Medicare for all. Like, there are single payer systems in the world, but I don't think there is one single payer system that exists in the world that covers dental, home health care, and vision as well as everything else, as well as
Yeah,
mental health care.
Canada doesn't.
Yeah, I mean
We
that would
should.
be the best system on the
Yeah,
planet.
you guys would go from worst to
Yeah,
best
I know,
in
right?
one go in a couple weeks.
So anyway, I didn't even know you were Canadian, Swole. That's pretty cool. What part of Canada are you in?
The only part that people live in, basically.
Within 50
Between
miles of the U.S. border?
between Montreal and Toronto,
Oh, okay.
halfway between there.
Yeah, I know most of the population's fairly close to the border. I don't know what the number is.
In Alberta, it's fucking Edmonton and Calgary and Fort McMurray are much more north, but everywhere else, yeah, it's by the border. Everywhere else.
Yeah, I remember seeing a statistic. I don't remember what it is. Yeah, I know about Edmonton and Alberta because I've driven there dozens of times. I was born in Leduc, which is like half an hour away from Edmonton.
Leduc.
Yep, it's a tiny town, but it's not the town we lived in. We lived in Kalmar, which is even tinier. It was. I don't think they hit the 4 digits in population until after we moved out. But they're like 1,500 now. So that was fun. My parents had to drive to Leduc to have me,
Nice.
but
My mom just said fuck it and had me at home.
yeah. Well, my younger brother, uh, who you're familiar with, was also born in a hospital. The seven that came after us were all born at home.
I'm familiar with your younger brother.
Yes, you are.
I am.
You didn't know I'm Theory Plebes, my younger brother?
What?
I'm sorry, I thought you knew that.
No, he had mentioned his brother a few times, but he probably told me and I just didn't put it together.
Well, yep. Yeah, he's 6 years younger than me, so
Damn.
there was some sibling rivalry. It's kind of funny because him and I probably hated each other more than anyone else in the family growing up. I was very much bought in, like I believed all the hype, all the evangelical crap, and all the authoritarian family structure, like listen to your parents, you got to obey, kind of shit. And he's always been a bit more of a rebel. I mean, he believed it too, but he was always more of a rebel.
You're a good firstborn.
Firstborn guy. I have an older sister.
Oh, okay.
So it was me and my older sister. Then there's a 6 year gap, and then all the next 8 were 2 years apart. So we were like a second set of parents. It was kind of a crazy dynamic.
Yeah, that's whack. That's crazy.
But anyway, thanks for coming, Eagle Wing. That's interesting information. I didn't know you were actually in the party structure. That makes it a lot harder to be like, yeah, let's cancel the Green Party.
Yeah, I would not recommend anybody else in Green Party structure to just start voting for another party. That would just be, it would ruin the party, you know.
Yeah.
But support that we can possibly get at all times, because we don't have that money behind us. So everything is volunteer. All the positions that I've ever held have been volunteer.
Yeah, I think everybody should go to the Green Party website and they should be involved. And there's good people and there's a lot of overlap because we're pushing for a lot of the same things.
I work a lot with the DSA on stuff.
Yep. DSA is another good organization. But yeah, the Green Party does have somewhat of a role just because it's there's a threat that exists that a third party can eventually replace a major party if the primary parties are not being representative enough. And it hasn't happened in over 100 years, and I don't think there's any chance of it happening anytime soon. but the threat exists, and it's something people have to be aware of in the Democratic Party. But I think an important dynamic to keep in mind as well that was pointed out to me fairly recently, and I was like, I think that's true, is Democrats would rather lose than have progressives in place. Because if they lose, they get $1 million lobbying jobs, and they sit on boards, and they collect the paychecks they get for selling out. So establishment Democrats can only be defeated. They can't be appealed to. We can't protest votes aren't going to change them. They can only be defeated in a primary, in my opinion.
Yeah, agree.
Alrighty. But was going to have a little bit of a chat with Swole here.
Yeah, I gotta get off the call.
Thanks for being here so long. Geez, we're like almost at 3 hours in here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me on. It's great to have more green voices and to meet people like you, both of you guys who are interested in green values and so you've actually worked with the Green Party.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
I was
We agree on virtually everything policy and value wise. So definitely
Thanks.
glad you're in it and keeping the boots on the ground and being active, organizing. That's all good stuff in the world.
yeah, keep up the good fight, guys.
Yep.
All right, thanks. Nice to meet you, Eagle.
Right, bye.
Bye.
Okay.
Cool.
So your video the other day, yeah, it struck a chord with me. Especially some of your things you were talking about your past, and I was interested in some of the details of some of the things you did to change some of your situation, and then you were talking about something that I can help you with, which is fitness and nutrition, motivation and planning.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have a plan. It's but definitely could talk about it more. I kind of was curious. I like to have a kind of an idea of where you're at, kind of geography wise. So can you guide me to like a general region of the map? Obviously, don't need to dox yourself here, but
down and to the right.
What province did you say?
Ontario.
Ontario. Okay. Oh, so you're like relatively close to the Great Lakes, at least.
Yeah, we're in between all the Great Lakes there. So go find Toronto.
Where's Toronto?
By Detroit, sort of.
We're
at the bottom of Ontario.
See Ottawa and Montreal. Oh, there it is, Toronto. Man, I didn't even know that was Canada.
I was like, where's it going?
I guess I don't spend that much time looking at maps. Jeez.
Cool. Yeah, right. So you see, yeah. So I'm in between.
Literally right in the middle of the Great Lakes.
Yeah.
That's cool. Don't the Great Lakes have an influence on the weather that's a little bit more moderate than if you get away from them?
Yes, that is moderate and wet. So I used to live like half hour, 40 minutes north growing up of the lake. And so we would get much drier weather, hotter in the summer, colder in the winter. But now that I live by the water, it can get pretty gross and pretty muggy at times, for sure. But at the same time, it's like the winters don't get quite as cold, and it can be nice Falls. Too. Yep. And basically every dot you can see on that map along the water I've been to.
Wow, that's cool. Don't think I've ever seen the Great Lakes. I've actually, when I was I left the house at 18 to go to Texas, northeastern Texas, actually. Tyler, so it was in the Tyler area for the Alert Academy. Check this shit out. And while I was with them, I volunteered and I spent a couple summers driving all over the country, like basically doing propaganda and recruiting for him. So I got the opportunity to drive through a lot of states, but we just drove through. We didn't like sightsee. Yeah, this is what I did. Strong to serve. Forging extraordinary men who influence their world for Christ. Also forging humanist atheist Bernie Sanders supporters, apparently.
Humanist atheist. Okay, cool.
Yep. Oh, they
That
have a
sounds
video. I've never seen this. We got to see this.
Alert's about making men of character, men of God,
Alert
men who will
Academy.
be able to be there for their families for the long haul.
Well, this is for young men who say, I want more. I'm not content with where I'm at.
We're all called to lead in some capacity, and we need to be ready and equipped and prepared to do so. Alert to me is all about discipleship. Basic training is about who I am in Christ, where I need to grow, and then giving them the tools to do that. Alert's going to push you in some way, shape, or form past anywhere you've ever been pushed before.
I didn't realize how much I needed self-discipline. I didn't realize how bad I wasn't relating to people.
Pendergast, I remember him.
I discovered that I could do more than I thought I could.
You remember him?
I could push harder than I thought I could.
It's a small school.
And that I could go
Never have, like,
deeper
more than
in my relationship
maybe
with
100
Christ
people.
than I ever had before. It builds a certain confidence in what God can do through you.
And that.
I sit around the campfire with them.
I have that
I go
shirt,
on hikes
Special
with them.
Response Library.
I spend time in the dorms with them.
We're standing with them shoulder to shoulder. That's what we're trying to make is a brotherhood of like-minded men.
Training alongside other men
Looks
has so much
hardcore.
value because shared experience is what bonds guys.
Soldiers for God.
I can share with them what God's doing in my own life and how it's going to impact them as well.
They do try to avoid the comparisons to militias. So there's no
Yeah.
guns or anything. But pretty militaristic, obviously.
From the bottom to the top, leadership across the board is involved in these guys' lives because the men are the mission.
What we're aiming for is that we would train men to serve. Now, if you're going to serve, you have to have tools to do that with.
And then it gives you opportunities to actually apply those service skills where you're on real-world disasters. I wanted to do something in public safety and then realized how professional the training here was.
Giving to those people who can give nothing back.
What the fuck?
To
This
me
is
really
training
sums up
for
what it
the
means to
military.
love.
We use a military structure to
Literally,
provide
like,
discipline,
is this
the
what it
Word
is?
of God to provide our foundation, and
it's a-
provide an example in
It's
the
a
lives
money
of God that
grab
have
to
done
get.
before.
You want to go in the military?
A
You
lot of
gotta.
life lessons that I got in Alert.
A lot of
Okay,
people
man.
did go to the alert basic training
It's
first.
just changed the way I look at myself and the way how God wants to use me.
'Cause once you
Alert
do one
changed my
basic
view
training, the
on what
next one's
godly
easier.
manhood looks like.
Yeah, you don't have to do the alert.
I believe in
obviously.
the mission.
Anyway, that's the gist of that. I wasn't even planning to go there, but I haven't been to their website in probably a few years, so that was interesting. Yeah, pretty extreme group. I mean, they do good stuff. It was fun being there, I have to admit. It got me outside of my my bubble for a minute. In a way, obviously it's a different bubble, like a very extreme bubble, but it was still like out of the house. And some of the guys at Alert were like not raised quite as extremist as I was, so there's a little bit of influence. But yeah, we learned how to do rappelling and chainsawing, and I was part of. There's a lot of governments that call on them for their emergency response skills. So I
Really?
actually got to be part of the disaster relief effort of a couple things. Most notably, after the Columbia shuttle blew up, we were the primary search team that was organizing all the search and recovery for the pieces of the astronauts in the spaceship that rained down.
What? In like 1980?
No, maybe it's the other one. Was it the Discovery? I could have too much.
Oh, I don't know.
It was like 2001 or 3 or something.
Yeah, that was Columbia was the one where the teacher died in the 80s, in like 80.
Nope, 2003. I was right. Yeah, the Columbia broke up as it returned to Earth, and it killed all 7. And pieces of it snowed over like 2,000 square miles. So it was a huge search area.
Oh,
But
well, then- I thought it was called Columbia, the 80s one. Oh well.
I'm not sure, to be honest. But Yeah, it was fun. I mean, it was fun to be involved in it. It wasn't fun to do it because we're talking in the dry area of Texas, full of bugs, thorns, blackberries. Like they have this kind of thorn there that looks like, what they always make the crown for Jesus out of, like 2-inch
Yep.
long spikes.
Ugh.
And the thing about, if you're going for a hike, it's no biggie. You just stay on the trail, you're fine. But when you're doing a search grid, you have to walk in a straight line, no matter what's in front of you. Like, we got so many scratches. There was more scratch than skin on us. It was ridiculous.
Jesus.
But, we picked up NASA patches, and I got a melted spoon,
Holy shit.
pieces of magnesium, and, different stuff. So it was the most notable thing I did at Alert anyway. So, what's your background?
Yeah, degree in politics.
Oh, no kidding.
And then I just kind of waffled around between shitty jobs and some 9-to-5s. And then went back to school, to trade school for fitness and health promotion. So I became a personal trainer and nutritionist.
Right on.
Except the problem with that, like, the money's great when you have clients. So you can be doing amazing, and then 6 months later it can all go to shit.
Right.
And you're late for rent.
You ever see what my URL is for my YouTube channel? It's Lean Body Coach.
Yes, I did see that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's used
Nice.
to. It was actually one of my first jobs. When I got out of Alert, I started working for a painter, and then shortly after, I got into concrete. But I started going to the gym at 24 Hour Fitness, and I was like, this looks pretty cool. I asked the guy, like, what would it take to be a part-time personal trainer here? And he was like, well, you'd need to get a certification. I was like, okay. Well, like, what certification do you like? He's like, I'll pick one. I was like, no, you pick one. I don't want to, like, pick the easiest. And he said the National Academy of Sports Medicine. So I came back a week and a half later with the NASM cert and got a job there.
Yeah, that's one of the I have ACSM, so that's one of the big three in the States.
Right on. So yeah, I was actually a lean body coach almost 2 decades ago.
Lean body, that seems like a specialty. Lean body coach.
Well,
things have changed a lot since then.
No kidding.
Yeah, a lot. In fact, I was just a couple weeks ago. When you have a certification, you have to fucking re-up, and you have to do continuing education credits. So I just found the kind of cheapest ones I could find, and from some accreditation body, and they were these classes that were like 10 years old, some of them, and the information in them was like half wrong. It was just ancient. It was like, did someone write this in the 90s? And basically they were.
So
it was all like, yeah,
it's wild that the one of the most pragmatic fields of science also has the least consensus in it. Crazy.
Exercise science is awful, and in fact, most of the science that's coming out of it is awful, like very poorly done. Like, oh my god! And nutrition is almost just as bad.
Oh, nutrition too. Yeah, I was watching some show. I forget. I think it might have been Bill Nye, but they're trying to like, okay, what's consensus here? What can we like know for sure? And pretty much all the panel agreed on is sugar's bad for you.
Yeah. I mean, fair. But yeah, beyond that,
what are some major things you think have changed in the last couple of years? Just as examples.
Okay, so a bunch. Well, in the actual kind of professional world, the accepted world, people know about sugar, and people are less scared of fat in terms of nutrition. That's good. That's not nearly enough, if you know who if you talk to the right doctors and researchers, there's much better info out there, especially in terms of things like fasting, intermittent fasting, a lot of stuff around immune.
Yeah, I've been
Immune
curious
function.
about that. Where do you stand on intermittent fasting? You think that's good or bad?
I am very pro
Very
intermittent
pro.
fasting. Yes.
Okay.
In fact, it's so good and so effective that there's you ever heard of the snake diet guy?
The snake diet guy?
Yeah,
No.
he's a complete reactionary asshole. But his his entire program is based around eating once a day or less.
Hmm.
And it's not just him who's come up with it. A lot of people have been doing this for a while. Eat one meal a day, and your longevity, disease, all kinds of shit gets way better. I've done 10-day fast before. In fact, I have a video about it on my fitness channel where I went through it.
I used to
I
try
did
to
it.
fast when I was a kid for religious reasons. Like they really pushed fasting.
No,
And
I mean, and lots of religions do it, and it turns out, and I wanted nothing to do with it until I read into the benefits. But yeah, I ended up healing a knee injury that had been plaguing me for 9 months. No,
hmm.
sorry, 18 months. And as soon as I fasted, injury was fixed. I had some skin issues. Skin issues were gone after that. I was trying to fix some
You're
IBS
giving me
symptoms.
anecdotes now.
Yeah.
This is how all the
Uh,
pseudosciences work.
no, but but
I'm
luckily there are studies to actually back a lot of the stuff up. In fact, a study. One of my clients is a doctor, and he just showed me a big meta study that came out last week, showing the benefits.
It wouldn't surprise me, like just thinking like evolutionarily, it seems like, that's kind of how we evolved. Like nobody
Yeah.
got 3 meals a day.
No, absolutely not.
So it looks like there are studies. I'm not I try to be skeptical of everybody. I'm not, obviously picking on you. I'm sure you know more about it than I do. But that is interesting. I don't know. I've always
Um,
kind of naturally gone to eating like 1 meal a day, and the problem is it's usually dinner and then going to bed with a full stomach, and doing that for
that's
a decade is basically giving me GERD because that's what it does. Very bad to do that.
why
Definitely.
does it giving you GERD?
Well, because when you go to bed with a full stomach,
Oh, right. Yeah.
the pressure when you're horizontal is all going up against your valve there, and it's erodes it over time and causes chronic heartburn, basically.
Oh yeah, it's definitely best to, well, especially if you're trying to lose weight, you definitely want to eat in the morning and not as much at night. Which I used to think that was not real. I used to think that was fake news, but no, turns out it's real. You're if you eat a meal for breakfast and you eat the same meal later in the evening, the difference in glycemic, sorry, not glycemic, in insulin spikes, or blood sugar spikes is huge. Your body can handle the insulin far better in the morning than it can at night.
Yeah. My concern with it was always like when I tried to do it when I was younger, like I could not go like 12 hours without eating. Like I started getting faint. I'd have to sit down. I'd get a tremendous blood sugar headache. And it was like I had to eat. I think I might have like some. My sister
Yeah, that
has
goes away.
hyperglycemia.
That goes away after a week
I
or
think
so.
so.
Oh yeah, that's not good.
Yeah, I didn't want to risk with that too much. When I felt like that strongly, I was like, I should probably not push it, especially when she's
Well,
been
those
diagnosed with that.
um, the cravings, the carb cravings that come with, I mean, that comes with eating carbs. That goes away
Right.
after about
Yeah,
a
I know
week.
that. Like I've talked to enough people. I know a lot of people who did fasting, and some of them were proud of doing like 20-day fasts and 40-day
Yeah, I wouldn't.
fasts, and
I wouldn't recommend that.
and they all
I
say
was doing
that
mine.
after 3 days, like it gets way easier.
Yeah, yeah, it does.
I guess my biggest concern now is I feel like, and I don't have evidence to support this, so maybe you can give me your view on it, but it seems like if you change your dramatically or don't eat, wouldn't that negatively affect your intestinal flora?
I mean, kind of. After For a lot of people who have candida overgrowth, it helps because if you go for a long time, because that shit'll finally die. Um,
That makes sense.
I mean, I would never recommend anyone go longer than 10 days. And if you're going to do 10 days, I would only do it for like because you had some kind of health issue you wanted to
Yeah,
get, to get
speaking
over.
of recommending, we should say that we don't make any recommendations here.
No,
Talk to your doctor
no, but
before you do dramatic lifestyle changes. Yes, please.
however, I mean, I would feel safe eating, doing intermittent fasting, shoving your food into a shorter window during the day, every day, like a 6-hour window, a 4-hour window, or even one meal a day. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no possible health issues with doing
Right.
something like that.
It's
It's the long water fasts that possibly can leave you. There's some risk there.
Yeah, speaking of that, I think the most successful diet I ever had was kind of a version of the lemonade diet. And I love that drink. I think it's really genius where you have like some type of sugar and lemonade and then cayenne pepper. And that's all you
Oh, yeah.
drink. And the genius of it is you use actual sugar. It's not a sugar replacement. So it keeps your blood sugar a little more stable. But the cayenne pepper keeps you from just like chugging it by the quart.
That's also necessary because you don't want to die of fucking hyponatremia.
Yeah.
Overwater yourself.
I found that I would just take a couple sips. It would like stop my hunger. And then like 5 minutes later, I'd take another couple sips. And it was really easy to do. I tended to get like a smoothie at night because I couldn't go to bed hungry. So it's a little more substantial with some more nutrients in it at night. But it seemed pretty successful. What do you think of like the lemonade diet?
The lemonade diet. I mean, yeah, if it works, it works. The main reason the main reason fasting, just pure fasting, is good. I mean, any diet you can lose weight on, but the extra reason that is good is because you get the cellular autophagy boosts that you don't get when you're putting in calories every day or two.
I have a nutritional certification and the National Academy of Sports Medicine from 2 decades ago, but you lost me with that term. Cellular.
That's
what
because
now?
autophagy. That's because it's a new
Autophagy.
term.
Wow.
I think that the first instance of it came out in like 2014 or something like that. It's cellular autophagy is just the process of your body cleaning up dead parts of cells and doing work to clean up dead cells or damaged cells and using that as energy. So it's basically your healing and regenerative processes go into high gear after a period of so when your body starts starving basically and says, okay, we're out of carbs, we can use fat, but it's expensive. What do we do? Okay, we'll obviously we'll start burning fat, and we'll also go into high gear with the cellular cleaning because we can clean up and use the energy from cleaning up at the same time.
Interesting. Yeah, I've heard of that dynamic quite a bit. Obviously, that's very important in weight losses. What happens when your body goes into kind of starvation mode and how it controls the metabolism and what it chooses to like kind of
Right.
feed off of.
Right. And actually the way we think about starvation mode is also changed a lot. Like it's kind of a myth that your body slows down. It is a myth that your body slows down when you stop eating. It actually speeds up your metabolism, I should say. It will slow down if you diet in specific ways, like eating rabbit food every couple hours and only a few calories. But If you go off just pure no food at all, you don't get that that slowdown, that metabolic slowdown.
But eating like spinach every once in a while does?
One of the worst things you could do is eat spinach every couple hours.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, that'll slow your metabolism, and it will keep you ravenously hungry. Like you'll never be satisfied because that slight bump of insulin and carbs will keep those hunger hormones coming back constantly, and they never subside.
Wow.
So they did it. These are tests they did in like the 30s. Experiments they did.
Our any audience that's remaining is probably very confused right now. We kind of did a hard switch there from politics, but I don't know who's watching now. It's okay. No,
they did it.
Very interesting.
There was a guy in the 30s who, I think it was the 30s, who was like 500 pounds, 500 or 600 pounds, and he went a year without eating anything except for, I think, water, salt, and like multivitamin. And all his vitals, like they tested after, were fine. Like no, he literally had no issues. He just lost a bunch of weight because he had all that fat to use, which seems ridiculous. But
well, I mean, if you're taking the multivitamins, I can totally that makes it seem more plausible, especially if you're really big to start with.
Yeah, that's a lot of energy you got in that skin.
No kidding. So what I'm hearing is we should all be 500 pounds. So when World War III hits and the supply lines are broken and we're all starving to death, you'll live the longest.
Yes, we'll be okay. Just stay off the lettuce every couple hours.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah. But I'd say the biggest change is on the fitness side. They've moved away from the machines and the bodybuilding stuff and towards functional fitness and towards barbells a little bit more. The functional fitness stuff is, in my opinion, a massive waste of time. CrossFit has kind of been confusing, but it has the benefit of introducing people to barbell training. But
they were talking
overall,
about the benefit of free weights when I was in it.
Right.
There's a lot of smaller muscles necessary for stability that get worked along the way, and it's a more balanced, natural way of working out that's less likely to injure you when you go to actually do something.
Yeah, right. So yeah, that is true, but it's still so they'll still teach you that, but they will also kind of, there's too much variety. They do a lot of time wasters. Basically, all the trainers nowadays will, I mean, they'll give you, if you start a workout program with them, that you'll be doing 80 different exercises in, a 3-month period, which in a lot of it will be basically not doing fuck all for you. Or if it is doing anything for you, it's basically one of the least efficient ways to do what you're trying to do.
Just too many exercises. What's the downside of too many exercises?
Too much variation. It'll just slow your progress.
Interesting.
Whereas if you were sticking to 5 or 6 barbell movements and focusing on adaptation recovery, and
80 sounds like a lot. I was just curious what your reasoning was there. I mean, I've always had a workout that I like and a system, and I kind of split it up in 3 different days. So I have just upper body, all of the upper body. I don't like to split out legs one day, or like arms one day and then back another day, because there's too much overlap. So I do the entire upper body one day. And then the second day I do like abs and core and stuff like this. And I do some cardio. And then the third day is leg day and cardio. And I do that twice a week. So there's one day off. Works pretty well.
So you do 6 days a week?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's a lot, but
since there's not overlap, it tends to work out pretty well. And I tend to focus more on the cardio part than like actual like weight training for most of that. The upper body is like weights, but like the other days I'll often just go for a long run or something because
You're skipping leg day.
I trust me, the last thing I need is leg day. I remember the manager that hired me at the 24-hour fitness, the story I was telling earlier, he was a huge guy. Like he's a bodybuilder forever. He's just ginormous. But I'd never really worked out legs much, and I think he challenged me, so I got on the leg press machine, and I maxed the thing out and did like 10 reps, like all the weights, and he couldn't even do that. I have pretty naturally strong legs.
Yeah, genetics play a big part.
Well, I'm short, so my legs are proportionally shorter, so they look muscular, and it makes it easier to do stuff like that, I think. There's a mechanical advantage there.
Right.
So yeah, that's good information. Like, what kind of workout regimen, like in terms of exercises, I would usually do like, I like to think of it in terms of motions. So there's the kind of bench press motion where you're just pushing your arms away from your chest. And you do the exact same motion, but with the resistance reversed. So if I'm pushing, it's working the chest and triceps. If I'm pulling, now I'm like reversed my body. So now I'm doing a row and it's working the back. So there's like that motion and works out the most muscles. And then there's the other motion, which is up and down. So if I'm pulling down, it's working the lats and biceps. And if I'm pushing up, it's working the shoulders. So I kind of focus on those two motions for the most part. And then if I have more energy, I'll isolate some individual muscles like curls and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's basically you're just working in movement planes and exercise. Movement patterns. So it's all the language now is movement patterns, but it's basically what you just said. So as long as you have a an upper body push, an upper body pull, and an upper body vertical push, an upper body vertical pull, and then you have a squat and a dead, basically a squat pattern and a hinge pattern that covers basically everything. That covers core, because you can't do a heavy squat or a heavy deadlift without a strong core. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with adding in oblique and core work, but and ab work.
Never really been into the deadlifts. It looked too dangerous, and I didn't want to.
Deadlift is the best exercise you can do. That's the king.
I don't think I could do it now, just because if I'm by myself here and I have to throw the weights down and I have 4 dogs running around, I'd probably kill somebody.
Yeah.
My dogs are always nosing around while I'm working out.
Do you have a squat rack at your gym? At your house?
I have a squat rack. My little home gym here actually does have a squat rack. So, I can do a safe squat. I just can't do like a free deadlift.
A free deadlift?
Yeah, the barbell, and you just snatch it up.
Yeah, right. You don't have a platform probably either.
No.
Because deadlifts will smash. If you've got a concrete floor or something, you'll smash that.
Yeah.
With deadlift. Yeah. Or you could do RDLs, right? Because you won't touch the floor that way.
RDLs.
Romanian deadlifts, where you start standing instead of from the ground.
Oh yeah.
And you.
Yeah, I probably should. I know there's benefits to doing the heavy weights and the full body exercises. Kind of ties things, like we said earlier. Isolating muscles too much can be a negative thing. You want to work the whole body, tie stuff together.
Yeah, definitely
makes sense. Well, anyway, that's a good little intro to some fitness topics there. Thanks for that.
Yeah,
probably lost all our political audience, but that's cool.
Speaking of which. Sorry, before we move on, speaking of which, Kamazotz, I don't know if you know him from, he's been on Theory Plebe streams a few times on Twitch. He and I are going to do a fitness and nutrition stream Tuesday at 2:00 Eastern. and Kamazots is going to basically, I'm going to be his personal trainer. I'm going to lay out a plan for him. He's going to do at-home workouts and some in-the-gym workouts. At least that's the plan. And we're going to give him a nutrition plan, and he's going to be. We're going to make a jacked and lean comrade out of him. Get him to. I'm going to get him to try to lose 80 pounds by the summer, which seems ridiculous, but it's doable depending on what he's willing to do.
Oh, 100%. That's awesome. Yeah. Theory Plebe and I were going to do that when he was staying here, and we even got some video footage at the start of it. But then he had to leave, and I had a lot of stuff come up in like my personal life, and a lot of projects that all of a sudden needed to be done, and so
shit happens.
Shit happens, but it's a new year, time to start again.
Yeah.
One of the things that's stopping me is I have a game I play that I need to stop. So that's one of my things. It's there's this kind of I don't know if you're familiar with Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes.
No.
Game. It's one of these pay-to-win games that are stupid. I'm never going to play one again. Never going to play one again. I live in an oligarchy. Why would I want to play in an oligarchy? I don't understand. But anyway, I've been playing it for a couple years, so I'm pretty well invested. And if I don't play it, then I lose. Like I can get to the number 1 in the rankings and get basically it's like $5 worth of currency every day. It's not worth it to me anymore. So I'm gonna sell my account, and that'll free up some time so I can work out in the morning. I want to take the dogs for walks and runs more. So I got it. One of the things I bought around Christmas time was a harness to where now I can hook all 4 of the dogs together like a sled dog team.
Nice.
I wasn't being sarcastic when I said I had a sled dog team. So now I can go running with all 4 of them. It's going to be awesome. So looking forward to that. So yeah, you said you had some questions about my intro video there.
Yeah, because you said basically you changed your way of thinking and adopted kind of this critical thinking approach. And actually, when you first said that every problem has a solution, I kind of looked at you with a raised eyebrow, because I'm like, that's a very kind of technocratic neoliberal perspective on problems, but I mean, there's also some truth to it. If you think about it,
but it's very much of an optimist, you could say.
Yeah, and if you think about it the right way, it's not necessarily a technocratic neoliberal way of thinking about things. And I'm thinking, I think that I approach things in a critical thinking. Like I always thought of myself as good at critical thinking. But realistically, I probably do not apply that critical thinking the way I do to school or philosophy or politics to my own life. I'm probably not doing that realistically,
right,
to my full potential.
Most people don't. Like it's odd, but we get in this rut and we feel like this is the way it is, and we tend to blame ourselves, and it's like, man, if I only had a little bit more willpower, I would do this. But I think it's important to be real with yourself and be like, well, this hasn't changed. I need to figure out why it's not changing, and then fix it.
Yeah, right. And I'm having a few areas that I'm struggling on that shit too. But unfortunately, I actually have to run back to work.
Ah, crap.
Yeah, so maybe we can continue this conversation some other time.
I was looking forward to introducing the methodology, but all right, we'll have to save that for another time.
I literally have to run to work. Good conversation, though.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. It's nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you, too. We'll set something up, maybe some other, I don't know. Tomorrow I have completely off. Well, Thursday
Yeah, my general schedule, I get Sunday, Monday off. Every other day, maybe after 6 p.m. PST.
Okay.
But otherwise, I'm busy.
Yeah, in the evening tomorrow or Thursday works. So.
Cool.
All right. Well, message me or I'll message you.
All right. Thanks for coming on. Have a good night.
All right.
Have fun at work.
Bye, Re-Vera. Thanks.
Right on. All right. Well, we had a couple of good conversations there. Feel like we've been going for a minute here. How long has our stream been going? Where's my stream window? Started streaming 3 hours ago. It's 3 o'clock. Yep. We have been going since noon. So I'm going to call it quits here. But if you're watching, thanks for coming. Welcome to the channel. Trying to have conversations with as many people as I can. So I feel like that was a pretty good conversation. Covered the ground I wanted to cover. Probably could have cut it short sooner because we were kind of going in circles there. But I do think if we have leftist values, we want to maximize those. There's no time like the present because we have a real chance at taking over the Democratic Party right now. As I showed in the stream, Bernie Sanders is actually tied for first in Iowa, which if you're anywhere close to Iowa or if you can donate, now's the time. When margins are tight, your influence matters more than ever any other time. So he's tied in Iowa and he's leading in New Hampshire. He's winning in California. I didn't see the latest poll in Nevada, but I know he's either winning it or very close. We're so close to winning it. If he can win as the nominee, we're going to have a very different century than if he doesn't. If he doesn't win, I think Trump would beat any of the other establishment candidates. And even if they won, they're not going to bring the change we need to make the changes that need to happen. So I have a link to Bernie Sanders' website in my description. Please donate to him. I'm not asking for your money from me. Send it to Bernie Sanders. And volunteer, do everything you can. I'm going to be spending a couple of the next weekends driving to Reno. Want to practice what I preach. And Nevada is one of the first 3 states. It's super important. And I'm in driving distance, so I'm going to take a couple weekends and go up there and canvas and do what I can. So I ask you to do the same, and we can make some real changes. So thank you so much for coming.